What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was seduced by the spirit of a succubus sealed in Konoha? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. In a large room with a large circular style to it, surrounded by people sitting behind large curved desks in a bit of a ring around him. A young blonde of around 11 years old was sat in a chair in the middle of the ring of desks, of which there was a second level with more people behind it. These people were all adults, obviously, of varying looks and sizes. However, in the middle of the outer ring of people, sat a very particular person, an old man with white robes and a conical hat with a red diamond shape in the front where his face was. The hat also had a large print of the kanji for fire on it, both robes and hat signifying that this was the Hokage, or to be precise, the Sandaime Hokage. Sitting in the row with him were the clan heads of Konoha, Uchiha, Hyuga, Aburame, Inuzuka, Akamichi, Yamanaka, Nara, to name a few. Meanwhile, on the lower row were the civilian council members, merchants, prominent family heads, and the like. Sitting in the chair in the middle of all this was one Uzumaki Naruto, who was dressed in a large sweater that drooped somewhat off his left shoulder, and a pair of what could only be described as yoga pants. The boy chose his own clothing. Naruto-kun, do you know why you are here? Tilting his head a little, the boy thought for a moment on the Hokage's words, before finally shaking his head. Well, obviously you remember what happened to you just a few days ago, correct? I don't think that's something any child could forget, even one in the ninja academy. It was quite violent and against your will, after all. Naruto blinked, before his eyes widened a little, as if he were remembering something. You mean that? Sighing softly, the Hokage simply nodded, and the boy in the middle of the room gave a shrug. I really haven't thought about it. I mean, why bother when they didn't even taste very good? Multiple people within the room sweat dropped at this, having heard what had happened to the boy. While the civilians didn't particularly like Naruto, they still believed that something like what had happened to him was inexcusable. Ahem. Yes, well, with that I believe I shall get to the point of why you are here. Naruto, what happened to you is wrong, yes, but it unlocked something in you that hasn't been seen in centuries. Tell me, what do you know of your surname's origins? Uzumaki, is it? Well, if I'm honest, I thought it was just a name you stuck me with cause I'm an orphan. Why, is it important? Yes, Naruto-kun, your surname is very important. It is not, as you said, simply a name I stuck you with due to your status in the village. No, the Uzumaki was a clan, a very important one might I add. One which you hail from, Naruto-kun. Sighing softly, the Hokage shook his head, before glancing at the Nara clan head, Shikaku, and giving a gesture with his head. Mendoku's. Uzumaki, you, not the clan, though they are in this conversation. To put it simply, kid, you're all that's left of the Uzumaki clan that we know of. From what we know of them, if they were alive and knew of you, they'd be here looking after you no matter what. Naruto blinked, before lowering his head a bit, shaking it a little as well. Figures. I finally figure out I'm part of a family, a clan even, and they're not even alive anymore. Sigh. Oh well, nothing I can do about it. So what's so special about them that even in death they're messing with me? Well, Naruto-kun, it's not so much them that are messing with you, as it is their blood running through your veins. You see, when those men attacked you that night, in the manner they went about it, it triggered something to unlock in your blood. Something very old, if not ancient, that has been part of the Uzumaki clan for many generations, dating back even a bit before the time of the warring clans. Is that why I've been so damn hungry lately? I swear to Kami, if I don't move out of the red light district very soon, a lot of those women are gonna get ate. It'll be a mixture of good and bad, I'm not too sure yet, a loot of things going through my head since that night. Almost everyone behind the desks blushed at the boy's words, before the Hokage cleared his throat loudly to get everyone's attention again. Why yes, Naruto-kun. That is most certainly the reason. Though, I wish you would have told me sooner, for you see, your mother actually wrote a journal the moment she found out she was pregnant. Just in case she were to have a son. Whoa, hold the communicator. You mean to tell I had a mom? Wow, learn something new every day. Yes, Naruto-kun, you did. Pray tell, where exactly did you think you came from, if not from your mother? I thought the stork brought me here. Figured it got the wrong village too, cause no one seems to want or like me. Sweat drops all around again. No, Naruto-kun. Just no. You had a mother, but unfortunately she died when you were born. However, the moment she found she was pregnant, she made a set of journals, for whatever gender her child came to be. She made these, despite the fact that what unlocked in you that night hadn't even been seen in her clan for perhaps a dozen generations. It just stopped showing up for some reason, yet still she made the journals, as was tradition when an Uzumaki was giving birth outside of their homeland. So what is this thing anyway? I mean, ever since I got here the only thing I can smell is your tobacco, that doggy lady over there, and a lady smelling of metal and blood standing behind you. Geesh, old man, you must smoke a lot to register on this nose of mine. Ever since that night the only thing it's been registering are girls. They smell so nice it gets frustrating sometimes, and then my undies get all tight. It's real embarrassing, you know. There was a mixture of amusement, surprise, and embarrassment at the boy's brazen words. Though it could be forgiven, he was still young despite his attendance of the ninja academy. Oh my, Naruto-kun, that's quite a surprise. You were really able to smell one of my guards simply because of their gender? Yup, she's to your right. I'd say about 5 feet and some change, maybe 24 years, Gosh, she smells so good, Tilda. Naruto's eyes began to glow a little at this, and he unconsciously licked his lips, before he felt something impact his forehead. Itai. Pouting and rubbing his forehead, Naruto looked at what had hit him, finding it to be a tiny bottle filled with some kind of dust. Sniff that, it will solve the problem. The voice that spoke was female, and it had come from behind the Hokage, who gave the boy a small nod. Shrugging, the boy took the tiny cork off the thing and brought it to his nose. With a small, cautious inhale, his eyes widened and he sneezed. Achoo! Chuckles abounded as the boy sneezed, about 4 times, before sniffling and pouting, glaring up at the space to the Hokage's right. Sticking his tongue out at that spot, he childishly threw the bottle back. The only difference is the tiny object made a sharp whistling sound as it flew from the boy's hand, causing eyes to widen as the Hokage leaned to the side to dodge it, and the woman behind him to the right had to jump to stick to the ceiling to do the same. With a loud crack, the wall behind the Hokage cracked a bit as the small bottle shattered against it, sending its contents scattering around. Taking of his hat, the Hokage blew the smoke the opposite direction from him, a bit of sweat on his brow. Well now, that was certainly surprising. Naruto-kun, were you aware that would happen? Having the tact to at least look sheepish, the boy rubbed the back of his head a bit. Well. Kinda? I mean, I've been breaking things without meaning to for a few days now. Ever since I woke up from whatever happened after those guys. Well, you know. I mean, I tried throwing a kunai the other day and it sheared through my wall. I don't really know where it went, either. Raising an eyebrow, the Hokage turned to Shikaku again, who sighed and gave a shrug. So that's why we found that man who'd tried, one of the girls of Madame Himi's brothel passed out behind the establishment with a kunai lodged mere millimeters from his crotch. Congratulations, Naruto-kun. You stopped something like what happened to you from happening to someone else. Completely by accident, it seems. Blinking, Naruto gave a small huff. Hey, if that's what happened, maybe I should practice throwing stuff from my room more often. The only one who gets those women's attentions after their jobs is me. He told resolutely with crossed arms and puffed cheeks. It would be adorable if the women he was talking about didn't work at a brothel. Naruto-kun, none of those women have ever touched you, like those men that night, have they? PSSH, no. I mean, after that night I kinda wish they would, but they all say I'm too young. Still, I get every hug I've ever gotten from those ladies. I'm just sorry I didn't skewer that guy trying to do something like that to them. Well, that's okay then, but I feel you will soon have to say goodbye to those women for a while. Why? Well, we were getting to that before you started smelling the women in the room. Some of them anyway. Nope. I got 'em all. Well, except that one. Even my nose is confused. Pointing, everyone's gaze was drawn to a very androgynous figure who currently had their head thunked on the table, sobbing quietly. I'm a man, damn it. The Hokage cleared his throat loudly once more to get everyone back on task, as it were. Anyway, Naruto-kun, this is the journal your mother wrote for if you were a boy, which obviously you are. And, since you awoke the blood of the Uzumaki males usually found dormant since generations ago, it is now yours. The sandaime had taken a small dark blue book out of his robe sleeve, and tossed it to Naruto expertly after speaking. The boy caught it and inspected it curiously. "So, what's it called, anyway?" "The thing I unlocked? Well, Naruto-kun, what you have unlocked in your blood is changing you slowly. While what you've unlocked does not have a name, what you are turning into most certainly does. For you see, Naruto-kun, you're turning into what is known as an incubus." Naruto sighed and reflected back on the day he'd learned what he had become. That had been 3 years ago, and now 14, Naruto was quite different than he was when he had been younger. For instance, he stood at a height of 5 feet 5 inches, with a slender yet toned build, with long golden yellow blonde hair. That's where normality in his looks stopped. His eyes were a bright blue like a cloudy sky, gently glowing even, with slit pupils, 2 smaller slits on either side of them, making it seem as if he'd 3 pupils in each eye. His teeth were somewhat normal, except he had fangs on the bottom and top jaws near the front, where his canines would have been. They weren't very long, but they were noticeable whenever he opened his mouth. Along his back in 3 spots on either side of his spine, were black swirl marks, like the Uzumaki clan symbol, but black. There was one on each shoulder blade, on either side of his spine mid-back, and again at the small of his back just above the rise of his bubbly butt and long black tail. These black marks were where his wings came from. He could reveal 1 set at a time, or 2 sets, up to all 3 sets at a time. His tail was about 3/4 as long as he was tall, and ended in a vaguely kunai shape. Finally, sprouting from between his temples, just to the inner side of either were small horns, about 1 inch thick, and 4 inches long ending in pointy tips. They were black and segmented, and though they were small for now, they were meant to grow with him, same with his tail and wings. Currently the young blonde was dressed in a pair of dark orange female sport shorts that cut off just below the hips with white trim, and a dark blue tank top that hugged his chest, yet was cut off just above his belly button. The shorts had a hole near the rim for his tail, which was currently swishing about, and from the small of his back a pair of bat-like wings twice as long as his arms were curled up against his back. He usually liked to have at least 1 pair out at all times. Yawning, Naruto shook his head and got up from the bed he was occupying, reaching for the nightstand to retrieve his Konoha headband. He had graduated a year ago, after completing special training of taijutsu and ninjutsu, and was then trained in genjutsu. He sucked at it, but that wasn't to say he couldn't use it, he just needed eye contact of some kind to use them. Probably something to do with his innate, always active charm ability, which only worked on females but utilized his eyes. Running his fingers through his hair as he pulled the headband tight, his tail came up to keep his hair out of the way as he tied it tight, before reaching for a special pair of glasses sitting on the nightstand as well. Placing them on his face, he grinned as the lenses glinted, before he turned to the window and opened it for the bird who had been pecking at the glass. Letting it land on his arm and accepting the message attached to its leg, he let it fly back off to the aviary as he read the note. "So, Hokage Gigi needs me, huh? Yeah, I guess it is around that time." Sigh. Looking out the window, he gazed upon what he could see of the village from where he was, seeing people walking about on the streets, shinobi and kunoichi using the rooftops. Lifting a leg, he set it on the edge of the window, before pushing himself up and out, giving a jump that propelled him to the roof across from his window. With a sad smile he was off, to the Hokage's tower, to meet with the old man for probably the last time for a few years. Standing in the Hokage's office, Naruto stood at attention, tail swishing behind him, his eyes glowing just a little more than usual. Behind him were 3 individuals, 2 men and a woman. The first man, the one to the left, was a tall man, with spiky silvery hair that defied the laws of gravity in the best of ways. He wore his headband as an eye patch, had a face mask that frustratingly enough covered the bottom half of his face, and wore the standard Jonin outfit. This was Hitaki Kakashi, the copycat ninja of Konoha, and his ninjutsu instructor. To the right stood the second man, whom was a couple inches taller than Kakashi, not counting the gravity-defying hair, with a bowl cut. That wouldn't be so bad by itself, not his taste, but not too bad. Except he had the thickest eyebrows he'd ever seen on anyone. Ever. The man also insisted on wearing a horrid green spandex suit with orange leg warmers and his headband worn as a belt around his waist on a brown cloth. The orange was the only thing he liked, and it was an insult to wear it with that shade of green, or at least on that style of clothing. This was my guy. Now if it had been a woman wearing it. Finally, directly behind him, and possibly the only person he trusted in such a position at this time besides the old Hokage himself, despite said man's ability to kill him in hundreds of different ways in like a second, stood the woman of the trio. She was gorgeous with long wavy onyx hair, wine-red eyes that drew you in if you looked too long, and a killer body to boot. That was a pun, too, if you thought about her profession. Her outfit didn't even seem to do much to hide it either, looking like a bunch of ribbons braided together, with red sleeves that cut off just at her wrists. This lovely, if cold-faced woman, was Yuhi Kurenai. Naruto ignored them as he listened to the Hokage, a somewhat somber expression on his face as he did so. Naruto-kun, you have completed your training in the 3 necessary fields. As you completed them, you were forbidden from knowing just what your teacher's thoughts on your progress were. Now you are being permitted to hear just what they think of your progress. First is ninjutsu. Are you ready, Naruto-kun? The boy gave a small nod, lips pursed anxiously as he turned and gave a nod to each adult that had been behind him. Turning, he looked to Kakashi, who gave him his patented eye smile. He actually somehow got a patent on it before speaking. Uzumaki Naruto, when you came to me you were almost at rock bottom in terms of chakra control, hand seal speed, and ninjutsu in general. Over the year I had you for training, however, you grew at an exponential rate, surpassing my expectations. I am quite happy with your growth, and am proud to score you at Jonin level in chakra control, low Chunin in hand seal speed, solid Chunin in jutsu known, and in how you utilize your techniques you are at the level of an experienced Chunin. Congratulations, you are the first person I've ever really taught, and I am proud to say you have positively colored my first experience as a sensei. Naruto actually blushed a little at the man's praise, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly, grinning quite happily despite the flush across his face. Wow, thanks Kakashi-sensei. I had a great time learning under you. And if you were a girl, I'd mean that literally, he said, winking at the man who simply rolled his eye. Try to give an Incubus some praise and they go and turn it naughty. Turning to the left this time, Naruto focused his attention on Guy, who gave the boy a toothy grin, the side of which sparkled for a second, making Naruto shudder. Shaking his head, he stood at attention once more. Naruto-kun, when you came to me, your youthful flames were barely embers, smoldering surely, yet not a true flame as of that time. Your taijutsu was sloppy, you barely knew how to throw a punch, nor a kick, and your tail was still new to you, so you hadn't even thought of using it in battle. However, as you grew with me over the year I trained you, that smoldering ember bloomed into a roaring inferno of youth. However, make no mistake, your progress with me was stunted by my lack of weights heavy enough for you to build your strength. Nevertheless, you made astounding strides in your style, accuracy, impact and speed. It is my profound, youthful honor to tell you how you came out in your springtime of youth. The style we created for you is still new, not yet perfected, yet despite that your youth burns brightly. I place you at a solid Chunin level with it. Your accuracy with your strikes is at a high Chunin level, and your speed is at low Jonin level. However, it is the impact portion of your style that has seen the most progress. Despite what people may think, strength does not equal impact. No, it is how you strike that determines that. So it is with astounding pride that I rank you high Jonin in terms of impact. Naruto smiled at the man at that, for despite his horrendous taste in fashion, he was truly a good man, just a little weird. Finally though, he turned to Kurenai, giving her a smile which she returned. With his special glasses on, his charm wouldn't work unless he was actively trying to make it work, so she wasn't blushing around him like she was when they first met. She's the one who gave him the glasses, actually. Clearing her throat softly, the woman spoke after lowering the arm with the hand she'd used to cover her lips through the action. Uzumaki Naruto-kun, you asked me how well I believed you had done when I told you that you had finished your training with me, there being nothing else I could teach you. Earlier in your training, I made you a promise, should you meet requirements for such. I am to reveal how well I believe you had done now, so please be very sure to listen closely, as you have done for Kakashi-senpai and Guy-senpai. The tone she used was serious, and it made him stand slightly more at attention. Behind the boy, the Sandaime looked a bit amused at all of this. He was glad Naruto had been doing well so far, but this woman had always been troublesome to read with her cold face. Who knew how well she believed Naruto to have done? Well, he knew, but still. When you came to be under my instruction, you were at the absolute rock bottom in everything genjutsu related. You could not sense when you were within one, you could not break one, and lastly, you could not use one. Your strange eye ability does not count as a genjutsu. She gave him a stern look, and his sweat dropped a little, before giving a small nod, tail swishing behind him anxiously as Kurenai continued. However low your skill was in genjutsu at the time, over the year with me you grew splendidly. Kakashi-senpai got your chakra control up to an adequate level, and your hand seal speed was decent. I could tell you had kept up on both even during your time with Guy-senpai. However, for my training you got much better at both, learning a couple more chakra control exercises, and truly speeding up your hand seal speed. As of now, your chakra control is up to my standards, as is your hand seal speed. Naruto perked at that, brightening that he had gotten that good at those things, enough to earn Kurenai's praise. He'd worked hard after all. Finally, your progress in the genjutsu arts in general. Your ability to sense when you are in one is adequate, you at least partially exceeded my expectations. Your ability to break a genjutsu is astounding, while I can still catch you in them most times, you are still able to break out of them a fair few times as well, which is no easy feat. Lastly, your ability to cast a genjutsu. It was tough work, more so for you, who has such large reserves of chakra, but I deem you adequate in their use, congratulations. Naruto smiled and threw a fist up in the air, though a small crack formed on the ceiling afterwards, making him sweat drop and rub the back of his head sheepishly. Sorry, got just a little carried away right there. The Sandame waved the boy off casually, chuckling softly, think nothing of it Naruto-kun. Now, the time for you to leave this village is upon us. Tomorrow morning you leave this village for 4 years, on a journey of discovery. Not only will you discover new things about yourself, but about this world of ours, its many peoples, and even the dangers it holds. This is a journey dictated by the laws of the Uzumaki clan, for the males who have unlocked their incubus forms. The rest of your clan may be gone, but you are still here, Naruto-kun. It's up to you to have this journey, honor their traditions, and when upon completion of the journey, to come home where people who miss you are. Naruto smiled and turned back to the Hokage as he spoke, standing proud, despite his unique state of dress for a boy. Now, before I dismiss you for the day to say your goodbyes, I believe your sensei had gifts for you. Please accept them, Naruto-kun. Naruto blinked, before grinning and turning right back around to face his 3 sensei again, hands folded behind his head. So I get gifts, huh? You guys really didn't have to. But, I thank you for them, and I will graciously accept them wholeheartedly. Kakashi was the first to step forward, Naruto turning a little to face him, lowering his hands down to his sides. Reaching into his hip pouch, the silver-haired Jonin pulled out a small scroll, swiftly unfurling it with experienced flourish. A poof of smoke appearing the moment the scroll was sufficiently unfurled. Not even a moment later it was rolled back up and in the man's hip pouch once more, before the man was catching a rectangular box. What's in the box Kakashi-sensei? Be patient Naruto, you're about to find out. I had to get a couple people's permission to give you this gift, so I truly want you to appreciate it when I tell you what it is. Naruto nodded and tilted his head a little, still wondering what was in the box, but staying quiet about it this time. Naruto, as your ninjutsu instructor, I feel that, in the absence of the only other person in the world who could teach you this technique, it is my duty to help you with this technique in my own way. Inside this box is a scroll. Inside the scroll are 3 things you will need to learn a very specific technique. The name of the jutsu is the Rasengan, and inside the scroll is instructions, materials to help you learn it, and 3 sealed shadow clones who will teach you each step to the technique. Naruto blinked, before smiling and giving a small bow as he accepted the box being handed to him by his ninjutsu instructor. He would have given him a hug. Hell, he'd have given all his sensei hugs, even the guys, but they were experienced ninja, high-ranking ones too, so it would never go down really well. Thank you Kakashi-sensei, I'll learn it fast, so I can show it to you next time we meet. Kakashi gave his signature eye smile and gave Naruto a wave, before exiting the room in a swirl of leaves. Once the man was gone, Guy stepped forward, carrying in his hands. Don't ask him where the man got it. It was like he pulled it from literally nowhere, a box that was fairly sized. Naruto-kun, earlier I said I hadn't any weights that would allow you to properly grow in strength by using them. Well, now I would like to amend that statement, as recently, through youthful use of bartering, I have acquired a set that will be perfect for you, at least for a while. Naruto-kun, I present to you your own youthful set of weights. Holding the box out to Naruto, the boy raised an eyebrow, but accepted it, blinking as a set of relatively small barbells and a pair of ankle weights sat inside of it. Guy-sensei, how are you carrying this if it's meant for me? Giving a grin that had his teeth glinting, Guy replied with a simple, I am shucking as much chakra as I can to my arms and feet. Giving a small smile, Naruto nodded and took the box from the man, eyes widening minutely as the weight almost made him drop the box of items. Like Guy had done, he began to shuck chakra to his arms and feet, noticing how the floor had indented in before he had done so. All of these together were more than he could safely carry at one time. It was a show of Guy's own continued training that he was even able to do so. Sighing, the Hokage reached into his desk, retrieving a scroll that he unfurled, showing it to be a storage scroll, now unrolled atop his desk, which thankfully had very little paperwork on it at the moment. Naruto-kun, please place the weights in this scroll for now. I'm sure you have your own, but you likely won't be able to get to them, holding something so heavy. Naruto smiled and nodded his head, turning to hover the weights over the scroll, still in their box. The Sandaime pulsed chakra through the seal on the scroll, and the box disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto sighed in relief as the weight left his hands, picking the scroll up and rolling it back up before placing it in the pouch attached to the small of his back, resting on the rise of his butt. Uzumaki Naruto, now it is time for you to receive my gift. I feel you have earned it, so please, turn around and face me, so I may give it to you. Kurenai's voice brought Naruto to attention once more, and he turned to give her a small smile. Hi, Kurenai-sensei. The woman gave a small, unnoticeable smile as the boy obeyed her, and once he was facing her, she reached into her right sleeve, pulling out a scroll of her own. With a flourish and a small puff of smoke, which cleared quickly, the woman was holding a box that was a bit bigger than Guy's, but flatter as well. This has been passed down in my family for generations. It is said to be the penultimate use of genjutsu, woven from genjutsu itself, surpassing the prowess of even those possessing the Sharingan, or even that of the Kurama clan. Naruto's eyes widened, and a grin appeared on his face, glasses glinting ominously, though he quickly pouted when the woman sent him a glare. That is not true, however. Nothing this item can do is related to genjutsu, I should know. I am the greatest user of it in generations of my family, many generations in fact. I do not know exactly what this item is, Naruto, except dangerous. Promise me you will never lose it, never lend it out, and never use it against the village or its allies. The serious tone she used made him gulp, and he quickly nodded, though apparently that wasn't good enough, her glare returning with a vengeance. I swear, I promise never to use this against Konoha or her allies, nor lend it out or lose it. I'll cherish it forever, that's a promise of a lifetime, Kurenai-sensei. The woman finally allowed a barely noticeable smile to grace her face, and Guy took this as his cue to leave, giving a salute before strolling out of the office. Opening the box, Kurenai revealed that, folded neatly within the cardboard container, was a black hooded jacket with large gold zippers going up the front, and on the sleeves and hood. The inside of the jacket was a pink color, and the article itself seemed to be made of a fabric he couldn't recognize. It wasn't cotton, polyester, or even leather or anything like that, but at the same time it looked smooth, soft to the touch, and quite sturdy. Giving a small bow to Kurenai, Naruto picked up the jacket, admiring it as he held it by the shoulders, unfolded now to allow himself a better look. With a smile, Naruto slid his arms into the holes for them, sliding them through the sleeves till he had the jacket firmly in place. It was then he noticed that it fit just a little loosely, and the sleeves went down to his knuckles, and were wide, as if they hid something within them. That jacket is very special, Uzumaki Naruto. I will not tell you its abilities, or at least what I know of them, however. Instead, I shall allow you to find them out on your own, and I wish for you to show them to me when you finally return home, understood? Naruto smiled and saluted. Hi, Kurenai-sensei. Standing in the hallway of an apartment complex made for the ninja in the village, Naruto waved to one of the Jonin who lived down the hall, a sensor who'd poked his head out when he'd sensed Naruto's chakra. Though, he'd only been able to do that because Naruto was out in the hall, The abodes within the complex were sealed to block almost all sensing techniques, natural or not. Once the man who greeted him was back in his own apartment, Naruto gave a soft knock on the one he was standing in front of. After a moment, it opened to reveal a breathtaking sight. Kurenai was at the door, hair wet, body glistening softly with water, a towel around her as if she'd just gotten out of a shower. Naruto, despite what he was stunned to say the least. "I've been expecting you, Uzumaki Naruto, please come in." Naruto nodded and entered the apartment as Kurenai stepped aside, closing and locking the door behind her. Once he was in, she folded her arms over her chest and gave him an appraising look. The boy had chosen to wear a simple orange t-shirt that hugged his torso snugly, a dark blue pair of shorts that clung to his butt, hips and thighs, and a pair of slippers, of all things. His lowest pair of wings were out, folded to his back, his tail was wrapped around his waist, and around his forehead was his Konoha forehead protector, which had 2 holes in the top for his horns, to help play them off as part of the item to the civilians. Motioning to her couch for the boy, Naruto nodded and took a seat, folding his legs and reaching up to fix his glasses on his face. Kurenai's voice stopped him as his middle finger was pushing them up his nose. "However, for tonight, I want you to take those off." "Naruto-kun." Blushing slightly, Naruto smiled and did as told, removing the special glasses and placing them on the small table beside the couch. Looking back at the woman, he couldn't help but let his eyes wander over her body. It was in his nature to admire the female form after all. "Now, tonight is very special, as it is the night I will be going through with my promise. The one I made to you during our training together. If your progress in my training was satisfactory or above, I would be the one to help get rid of your virginity. I understand that as an incubus, still having it even at this age may be considered strange, but I think you have done well in keeping it so long. Tonight, allow me to be the one who takes it away." She gave him a small smile and allowed the towel to fall, before moving to sit next to him, his eyes slightly wide at the woman's naked form. Even simply sitting next to him, merely an inch apart, just the sight of her body had made him begin heating up. He had held back so much with his urges and to an extent his needs over the 3 years he'd been changing. Gaining his tail with Kakashi-sensei had increased the hunger he felt before he had them. Gaining his horns with Guy-sensei had made the smell of the females around him almost intoxicating, way more so than before. Finally, gaining his wings and becoming a full incubus during the training with Kurenai had been the catalyst to him asking for this promise from the woman. He would hold back on his urges, wants, and to a small extent his needs. In return, Kurenai would be the one to take his virginity, and help him make it a night to remember. It had been difficult, the most difficult thing he'd had to do, but his built-up urges and desire had led to him writing about them to ease the heat he'd often feel. It was a bestseller too, up there with that Icha novel. Right now, however, Naruto felt as if he was feeling all of what he'd suppressed before. His body was heating up with a naked, willing female sitting right next to him, her scent intoxicating him, his eyes glowing as her naked form flashed in his memory, superimposed in various positions and states. The first thing, for instance, is there will be certain articles of clothing in this remake that are based on Pokemon, if you couldn't guess from the jacket Kurenai gave him. They contain certain abilities and even attacks that Pokemon can use, and make it possible for Naruto to use them too while wearing the items. I won't tell you which Pokemon the items are based on, but I'll try to give you as big of hints as I can with the descriptions of the items. Now, as for the layout of the stories, I don't know still. I guess some chapters will be full-blown adventures, and others will just be moving on from them and getting to them. I'm still not sure, but expect long chapters for those that are full adventures. In fact, this first one may just turn out to be one such chapter. We'll see where it goes, nay? One last thing is that I dropped a very subtle hint near the beginning of the first chapter, for something I'll be working on a bit later. Its content may not please everyone, but hey, we don't actually know that. It's a secret to everyone, after all, except for me. See if you can find it. Tell me what you think the super subtle hint was about. About 4 or 5 miles away from the first stop on his journey, a large town where he could gather information and other necessities, Naruto landed a bit away from the road, putting away all of his wings. It felt a little weird. He'd had at least one pair out at all times since he got them, even if he hid them from the civilians, but for this, he wanted to get used to not having them out at all times. He didn't want to hide himself anymore after all, and the wings were the hardest thing to hide. His horns were played off as accessories to his Konoha forehead protector, and his tail he could just wrap around his waist as a stylized belt of sorts. Currently he was wearing a pair of girls' sport shorts, orange with blue trim, and a blue tank top with orange trim. Over that he had the jacket Kurenai had given him, and on his feet he had a pair of dark blue ninja sandals that had attached shin guards. It looked normal enough, if a bit androgynous. The shorts weren't cut just below the hip like his pajama pair, nor did the tank top not cover his belly button. The bottoms were the only thing that could possibly be considered weird, being for a girl. But hey, he liked sport shorts, they were comfy. Making his way manually towards the road at an angle that would set him on a path to the town, Naruto stretched. Giving a small yawn, he sighed right after. It had been a few hours since he'd left the village, and the sun was now fully risen up in the sky. He'd thought the world outside Konoha would be exciting and new. It was new, sure, but it was about as exciting as watching paint dry. He almost pouted as he finally made it to the road, and the only reason he didn't was because he finally saw something a bit interesting. It was a group of people in several wagons drawn by horses, an animal he hadn't had the luxury of seeing ever before. Not a lot of people in Konoha had any after all. Tilting his head as they approached him, though not really, they just happened to be going the way he was going to be going. Naruto smiled and waved at them. If he hadn't been trying to hide his tail, he would have been wagging it happily at finally seeing something even a little bit cool while he was outside of Konoha. Receiving a wave in return, the blonde boy waited for them to get closer, wanting to see them up close and personal. The horses, not the people. There weren't very many women with them, it seemed. As they came up next to him, he walked to one of the horses, and though the people looked at him funny, and the few people carrying swords watched him carefully, when all he did was pet one of the large animals, the latter paid him no mind. However, the man holding the reins of the horses he was petting noticed his headband. "Hey kid, are you a ninja?" Blinking, Naruto looked at the man, before giving a nod, getting a grin in return. "Perfect. You one of those prodigies that graduated early? You seem pretty young." Naruto grinned, looking a bit sheepish as he rubbed the back of his head a bit. "Well, I wouldn't say I'm a prodigy, but I did receive personal training from 3 powerful Jonin back in Konoha. I'd say I'm as strong as any Chunin." "Perfect. How'd you like a little mission? Help our regular guards protect this caravan on the way to our destination, would ya?" "Mission? Sweet. What is your destination though?" "We're headed to the capital, Yoto-en City, home of the Fire Daimyo. We have some precious cargo we're transporting for him. Can't tell you what it is, but I can tell you it's very important." "So, what do you say? You'll get the going rate of a C-rank mission, no more or less, meals will be provided, and as long as you check in every few hours, whenever we hit another town you can do whatever you want. The only thing is you have to stay with us once we get to the capital." Thinking about it for a moment, Naruto quickly went over all he'd been told in his head. He'd basically be getting paid to beat up on bandits, or anyone else who tried to attack the caravan. Sounded pretty neat to him. "You got yourself a ninja, but when the fighting starts, make sure no one gets in my path, I can be kind of destructive." "Got it. Now go fraternize with the regular guards. Let them know you've been hired and stay away from the folks in the wagons, ya hear?" "Asu." Saluting, Naruto smiled and gave the horse he'd been petting one last pat, before heading over to the first of the men carrying swords at their hips. It was time to fraternize. Humming as he looked around at the people of the caravan taking a small break in the town he'd been going to before getting hired on to protect the caravan. The people who were inside the wagons were sticking close, but the guards were all checking out the market stalls closest to the wagons. Well, at least they didn't stray off or anything. As for the people with the caravan that weren't in the wagons, they had set up little stalls themselves and were selling some of their wares to the locals. Mostly it was things like fish, grains, fruit, etc. But there were also a couple selling clothing, fabrics, and even one selling books. Shaking his head, he made his way over to the caravan leader, adjusting his glasses properly on his face as the man turned to him. "I'm going to go get a few supplies, I'll be back shortly. Just thought I'd let you know, I'll try to stick to shops that are close by in case I'm needed." "Sure thing kid, just make sure to come back as soon as you're done. I got a strange feeling the moment we entered the town. Keep an eye out, got it?" Blinking, Naruto's glasses glinted, before he nodded his head. "I understand. I'll make my shopping quick then, so no worries. I'll be back before you know it." Once he was out of sight, Naruto gave a quick glance around to make sure no one was paying any attention to him, before stepping into an alley and creating a cage bunshin, a clone technique he'd been taught by Kakashi. Both blondes nodded to each other before the clone seemingly vanished in a ninja fashion. Giving a small sigh, the real Naruto quickly did the same, appearing on a nearby rooftop, looking down upon the roads in search of a shop where he could buy some supplies. Mostly he simply needed foodstuffs and water, since anything else he could get from nature, or buy whenever he stopped at another place. His mind was somewhat distracted however, since the feeling the caravan leader had spoken about had him suspicious. He knew full well that something as important as cargo going to the daimyo himself wouldn't stay secret for very long. Sure, it was something that was supposed to be kept secret, but that just wasn't how things worked, he knew that. Even as distracted as he was though, when a titillating aroma wafted into his nose, one he recognized very well, he couldn't help but lick his lips. He'd know that smell anywhere, and while he was sure the quality of what he smelled wouldn't be able to match what he could get at home, it was sure to be a good experience. Ramin tilde. Leaping from the roof, quite a few people were a bit surprised by Naruto's landing, though they didn't get much time to stare at the boy who seemed to have fallen from the sky, as he was gone just as fast as he'd landed. Completely forgetting about buying supplies, and the nervousness he'd had after what the caravan leader had told him, Naruto never noticed the giant of a man he sat next to after entering the ramen stand. His attention was solely on the big pots of ramen being made in the back of the kitchen area, eyes seeming to glow brighter in his joy. "Osan, I'll take 2 miso ramen, 1 beef ramen and a pork ramen." "Huh? You sure you can eat all that, kid? The bowls here are pretty big, ya know. I can eat him, don't worry about that. I will always have room for Kami's gift to the culinary world." The chef simply laughed heartily at Naruto's words, before getting started on his order. "Coming right up, kid, but don't blame me if ya go and get a bellyache or something." Naruto simply grinned cheekily, having to almost consciously restrain his tail from unwrapping from around his waist and waggling all over the place like an excited pup. It was only then, as he was waiting for his order, that he noticed the large man sitting next to him, slurping up a large bowl of what smelled to be really spicy ramen. "What are you looking at, Runt? Something you find interesting? Oh, no, just interested in the ramen, really. It's a shame, but I've never had any spicy ramen. Is it good?" It's pretty good, can't complain. Really, it's quite a surprise finding a spicy ramen that's so good though. Usually the spiciness overpowers the flavor. It's nice finding a cook who can balance the two." Humming, Naruto nodded and then smiled as the first bowl of his order was placed before him. Taking a pair of chopsticks, he broke them apart and clapped his hands together softly, "Itadakimasu tilde." Ignoring the man he'd just been speaking with in favor of digging into his ramen, Naruto completely lost sight of almost anything else as he took the first bite. Both the man he'd been speaking to and the chef who'd made the ramen looked at the boy as he went still, eyes wide, and they could both hear the sound of cracking as his fingers twitched around his chopsticks. You okay there, kid? Look, if you don't like the ramen. How? What was that? How did you do it? This is better than Tuchi-osan's ramen. Tuchi, was it? That's my kid brother. Say what? Yup. Tuchi. It's been a while, how's he been? I haven't talked to him in 20 years, seems like. Naruto sniffled a bit as he dug back into the ramen, slurping it up swiftly, surprising both men watching as he finished it in seconds. "Gah, I never thought I'd taste a ramen as good as old man Tuchi's, but turns out I get to taste something even better. Oh man, I think I'm gonna cry." The chef simply laughed again, going back to fixing the rest of the boy's order, while the man sitting next to the blonde had a massive sweat drop on the back of his head. Just how addicted did one have to be to ramen to cry over it? As for Tuchi-osan, he's doing really well back in Konoha. Him and his daughter Ayame-san have a ramen stand just like this one. You may make awesome ramen, Osan, but I'm still a faithful customer of Ichiraku Ramen, Datbayo. Almost as soon as the word left his mouth, Naruto slapped his hand over his lips, eyes wide. "Datbayo? Got yourself a verbal tick there, kid? Shut up. Anyway, Tuchi-osan is doing good, so there's no need to worry about him." "Hey, guess not. But to hear he has a daughter, and I didn't know about it till now. Guess I'll have to get back in touch with him soon. Anyway, kid, thanks for telling me about my dear old kid brother." The name's Takei, by the way. Giving a small nod, Naruto began to dig into his second bowl of ramen as it was placed down in front of him. By this time the man who'd been enjoying his own ramen next to the blonde got up and left some money on the counter before leaving. However, as he was, Naruto glanced over at him, catching sight of a small tattoo on the back of his right shoulder. It was a tattoo of San, the kanji for 3. Closing his eyes with a small sigh, Naruto placed his now empty second bowl down on the counter. "Oh-san. Cancel those last 2 bowls. I'll pay for all 4 though, in apology for the inconvenience." What's the matter, kid? Thought you said you could eat 'em all." "I can, and normally I would. But it seems I'm being called back for my work. I'm on a mission right now after all." Near the caravan he'd been hired to protect, hiding in the shadows of an alley, Kage Bunshin Naruto was surveying all that he could see. The alley was fairly close to where the caravan had set up, so the clone could quite easily keep track of the whole thing, and the shadows of the alley kept him hidden. From what he could see, and had been seeing for the last few minutes, things were going fine with the caravan. People were buying their goods, and while there may have been some rude customers, everyone was getting what they came for, and he figured the caravan members would be quite pleased with their sales. Well, except the one selling the books. Not a lot of people seemed interested in them, probably preferring the more widely used scrolls. However, being on alert as he was quite aware when someone else entered the alley he was in, and he quickly plastered himself to the wall, a camouflage sheet held up to disguise himself. The one who'd entered was a man, average height and build, with scruffy short brown hair and dark brown eyes. However, from what he could feel from this man, he didn't seem all that average in terms of power. Not a match for him, but most definitely not average. It showed, as well, when after reaching where he was in the alleyway, the man looked over at him. He was confident the man couldn't see him, but he got the feeling the man could sense his presence. Sweating a bit as the man took a step towards him, Clone Naruto pressed himself further against the wall, clutching the camouflage sheet tighter. Just as the man reached out for his hiding spot, making it seem as if he would be found out, something quite strange happened. He fell backwards, blinking in surprise, though probably not as surprised as the occupants of the house he'd fallen into. Through the wall no less, Naruto quickly leapt up. Before the seeming mother and daughter of the house something quite fortuitous for him could scream, he took off his glasses and looked them both in the eyes. They calmed down immediately, dark blushes blooming upon their faces, the mother's knees going weak, only Naruto quickly moving to steady her, stopping her from falling. Speaking quietly but quickly, Naruto pulled both females against him, one in each arm. "Listen closely, I need you two to forget you saw me, okay? I was never here, you've never seen me before, okay?" It was the younger female who spoke first. She couldn't have been older than 10, and her reaction to him was a lot more innocent. "Oh, Oni-chan." Sweat dropping a bit, Clone Naruto shook his head a bit, before moving the hand of the arm holding the little girl to rub her head a bit. "Don't worry, Oni-chan won't forget you. But, I'm afraid you'll have to forget Oni-chan. Can you do that for me?" The little girl got some tears in her eyes, but gave a small nod, making Naruto give a small smile. The first time he'd been called something like Oni-chan, and he couldn't even enjoy it. Releasing the two, he ran through some hand seals before placing his hands on both females' heads. Looking them in the eyes one after the other, their eyelids began to flutter, before they both fell asleep, Naruto lowering them gently to the floor. Sighing, Naruto went back and collected his camouflage sheet, folding it and quickly stowing it back away, before heading to the window and subtly peeking out of it. How did I get in here? He thought about it for a moment while observing what he could of the caravan through the window. He knew he didn't have any way for him to do something like what had just happened. He was never able to pass through solid objects before. Boy, he wished he did, but it just wasn't possible for all he knew. There were no jutsu that would allow someone that ability. Then he remembered the jacket Kurenai had given him. Eyes widening, he gripped the sleeves of the garment, a small grin appearing on his face. He would have to thank Kurenai for her gift. Not only had it just helped him stay undiscovered, but it had given him, if inadvertently, an ability most other shinobi would kill for. Now he simply had to learn how to do it at will. Shaking his head, Clone Naruto resumed looking out the window, making sure no one would notice him as he did so. Everything was still fine, nothing looked out of place at first glance, but looks were incredibly deceiving for those who didn't know how to properly look for certain things. From where the window was, he could see that the man running the book stand was talking to the man he'd seen in the alley, doing so in a rather hushed way by the looks of it. Obviously this wasn't some ploy to get some sales by having someone buy something first, and then seem impressed with the purchase. Sighing, Naruto went back to the wall he'd fallen through, staring at it intently, gripping the rims of his jacket sleeves again. "Come on, let me through." As he thought that, he placed a hand on the wall and began to push lightly, sweating just a little as he concentrated on where he was touching. It took a few moments, but finally, he felt a sensation as if warm water was flowing around his hand, before it sunk through the wall silently. Grinning, the clone confidently took a step forward, and through the wall, appearing back in the alley he'd been in before he fell through the wall earlier. Letting out a breath, Naruto smiled at what he'd just done, and couldn't wait till he popped and let the original get this information. Kurenai had hinted that there was more than one power to it, yet even now, just this power alone was already kick-ass. He couldn't wait to find out all that the jacket could do. Shaking his head of such things, the clone focused back on the matter at hand, shifting over to the edge of the alley and peeking out upon the caravan once more. The man who'd almost found him was no longer speaking with the one running the book stand, and said man was nonchalantly taking down his stand. Narrowing his eyes, the clone slunk back deeper into the alley before disappearing ninja style. It was time to get some information. It didn't take long for him to find the man from before in the alley. He was walking down the street with his hands in the sleeves of his yukata, arms crossed. Now he only needed to find out where he was going, and the best way to do that was to follow him, something he proceeded to do from the rooftops. Kakashi had told him that civilians hardly ever looked up while looking for someone, so he figured he'd be safe doing so. He never took into account the fact that he may be being followed himself. By the time he had followed his target to a large warehouse near the residential district, as he was hunkered down atop a large roof overlooking his target, he was surrounded. Watching as the man he'd been following entered the warehouse, the clone stood up and gave a grin, ready to head down and give a little peek into the building. More intel was needed, after all. Suddenly, his eyes widened as he felt several presences around him, before hanging his head. Kakashi-sensei would never let him live it down if he ever found out he'd been surrounded so easily. Stupid tunnel vision? Oh well, learning experiences and all that. Turning around to face the people around him, he was surprised to find himself facing a trio of people wearing Konoha headbands. They were about the proper age for genin, maybe a year or so older. Behind them was a significantly older person, a woman who looked to be in her early 30s. The group of obvious genin had 2 girls and a boy from the looks of it, and they were pretty varied in looks, as well. The genin on the left had short brown hair, eyes a darker shade of brown, wearing a tan trench coat over a mesh shirt and brown tank top, with a pair of dark brown spats, and tan ninja sandals. She reminded him of someone he'd seen around Konoha a few times. The one in the middle had shoulder-length black hair and chocolate brown eyes, wearing a simple black button-up shirt and dark blue shinobi pants, with dark blue shinobi sandals. He was kind of average, if a bit serious looking, though he couldn't tell if that was just the boy's face or if he was trying to look that way. The final genin, the one on the right in the trio, had long black hair with dark chocolate eyes, a serious carefree disposition though it looked pretty serious right now, wearing a dark blue combat kimono with armored shoulders, a chest plate, and a pair of black ninja sandals with built-in shin guards like his. She was really pretty. As for the jonin of the group, the woman had long brown hair with dark chocolate eyes, wearing the standard jonin flak jacket, a dark blue shirt with armored shoulders, a pair of dark blue shinobi pants, black shinobi sandals, and over everything she had the most badass coat he'd ever seen. It was large, going down to her ankles, dark blue in color with green leaf patterns on it near the bottom. Oh, well, it must be my lucky day or something. For a second I thought I was in trouble, but it's just some more Konoha ninja. How can I help you? It was the boy in the middle of the genin trio that spoke up, all 3 seeming to give him serious gazes. Shut up. You are in trouble, a lot of it. You're intruding on our mission, and you're quite a long ways from the village, possibly illegally for all we know. State your name and reason for being here, runt. Otherwise we're capturing you and leaving you somewhere till our mission is finished. Then we'll take you back to Konoha to face charges. CH charges? Oi, I'm here for a perfectly reasonable and Hokage-approved reason, Ttebeo. Immediately he slapped his hands over his mouth again, sweat dropping at that troublesome verbal tick. It hadn't showed itself for months, so why now? Ttebeo, the hell does that even mean? At this, the Jonin behind the group reached and cuffed the girl in the trench coat upside the head. Hush. Let him explain himself. The woman then turned to Naruto, giving him a stern look of her own. Well, go on. Ah, right. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, Genin of Konoha, and I'm here on a journey dictated by my clan, which has been approved and enforced by the Hokage himself. How do we know what you're saying is true? You could be lying, though I personally like to believe you. It would alleviate quite a bit of the trouble you are in. Looking to the girl with the combat kimono and armor, Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly, giving a little shrug. Well, it's kind of a secret as to why I'm on a journey dictated by my clan, but it would come out sooner or later, I guess. It will be easier if I just show you though, instead of explaining everything right now. With a smile, Naruto brought out his wings, and uncurled his tail from his waist, revealing them in their glory. The 4 Konoha ninjas' eyes widened at this, and the male genin took a step back, even. Wh? You see, I'm part of the Uzumaki clan, and well, I'm an incubus. This brought a flush to the Jonin's face, as she was aware of just what that was, but the genin were a bit clueless. To them it just looked as if he were some kind of demon or something. Okay, you 3, calm down. Rika, furry, don't look him in the eyes. Blinking at the Jonin's apparent knowledge of what he was, he smiled and shook his head. She must have read his books. Don't worry, as long as I have these glasses on, you don't have to worry about that particular ability. Unless I'm actively trying to make it work, these glasses will completely block the effects of my eyes. That certainly seemed to calm the woman a little, but the genin now seemed a little confused, atop of their seriousness. What's an incubus, sensei? This brought blushes to the 2 female genin's cheeks, and a disgruntled look to the males. So, when you said not to look him in the eyes. The woman behind the trio gave a small smirk. Incubi seem to have the ability to charm any female that looks into their eyes. Of course, just being around them does the same trick, if a little slower. Gay, so should we really be sticking around him then? Turning to the genin with the combat kimono, Rika, Naruto pouted a little. That's not nice. I work really hard to keep that ability in check. Do you know how hard it is to suppress something like that? You're suppressing it? Yup. Hey, otherwise you wouldn't be able to look away, tilde. Waggling his eyebrows, all 3 genin rolled their eyes, though their sensei just sweat dropped. Finally, the male genin spoke up again. Anyway, all that aside, you need to leave. That man you were following is a part of our mission. Tilting his head, Naruto's tail began to swish about behind him as he thought about that for a bit. Nope. He's planning something against the caravan I came into town with. If I let him go now without getting any kind of information, I won't know how to stop whatever it is he's planning. Idiot, there won't be any need for that. Because we're going to take down the bandit organization he works for. Takeshi, be quiet. You aren't supposed to tell anyone the parameters of a mission, even comrade, if they aren't on the mission as well. Sorry sensei. Chuckling softly, Naruto shook his head and shrugged. Oh well, what am I gonna do? Get in trouble for impeding your mission progress. I'll bow out for now, but the moment they attack the caravan I'm protecting, I'm taking them down myself. Got it? The Jonin sensei of the team of genin gave a small nod. Thank you for this. We'll try to finish them up quickly, so you won't have to worry about them attacking that caravan you're guarding. But for any other bandits, you're on your own. Naruto smiled and gave a small salute, before hiding his wings away and coiling his tail back around his waist. Well, that's good to hear, but I'll be keeping an eye out until we leave this town. If you need backup, just be sure to flare your chakra, I'll come running. Thanks for the offer, but we're pretty experienced, we won't need backup. Now go on back to the caravan. If they have others watching it, you'll need to be there as a deterrent. Nodding, the Naruto grinned and sped off across the rooftops once more, back towards where the caravan was. He hadn't been gone for more than half an hour, so nothing really should have changed, and hopefully it hadn't. With the real Naruto, we find our blonde incubus tailing the man from the ramen stand from a few rooftops behind him. The tattoo had seemed suspicious enough for him to believe the man was some kind of high-ranking bandit, so he had left the stand not long after him to tail him. If he was some kind of high-ranking bandit, it was his job to make sure he wasn't planning to try and get at the caravan he was protecting. Even if he wasn't, if he was a bandit, he'd feel much better about himself if he took him out. And if he wasn't a bandit, well, no harm in following someone if they never knew you were doing it, right? Grinning to himself, Naruto watched as the man entered a large building in the red light district. As far as those places went, this one seemed a bit small, but Naruto didn't focus on that for long after having entered it. Instead, he paid all his attention to the man he was following, and when he had entered the building, Naruto quickly leapt to its roof. Now he had a small problem, however, and that was how he was going to get inside without alerting anyone. It wasn't a casino or gambling den, and it definitely wasn't one of the brothels he could see, which weren't very high quality, by the way. Sighing and rubbing the back of his head a bit, he pursed his lips in thought, wondering just how he was going to get in. He never knew what hit him when his world suddenly went black, unconsciousness taking him quickly. The last thing he heard before he went under completely was a feminine giggle. Clone Naruto's eyes widened as, after getting back to the market district, almost to his destination of the caravan, he suddenly popped, sending back all that he'd learned to the original. However, for him to just suddenly pop like this, and not good, groaning softly as he blinked his eyes open slowly, Naruto winced as he got them open enough for the light to sting them, and moved his left hand to his head to rub at it. Information was filtering into his head, meaning his shadow clone must have popped. Damn, who the hell hit me? He was brought from his thoughts by the sound of the door opening, and looked up to find the man from earlier standing in a doorway. Ignoring him for the moment, he took in his surroundings, finding surprisingly well-polished wood for the walls, floor and ceiling. He seemed to be on a large comfortable bed, though there were chains attached to his wrists, and they seemed to be cutting off his chakra. Another thing he noticed was that he didn't have his forehead protector on, and his jacket was folded up on a chair next to the bed. Looking back to the man, he glowered at him. "Oi, what's the big deal, huh?" The man simply raised an eyebrow. "What's the big deal with you? What possessed you to follow me from the ramen stand? I've done nothing to you, and my boss has given you Konoha shinobi no reason to come after us." "What are you talking about? First off, who are you? As soon as I figure that out, and who you work for, I'll know if you have an ass whooping or an apology coming dat bayo." Once more slapping his hands over his mouth, Naruto gave a sheepish look while the man simply raised an eyebrow again before shaking his head a bit. "My boss will be here shortly to talk with you. Be polite, and be sure to tell him why you were following me. He'll let me know later. For now, you just sit back and enjoy our hospitality." "Hospitality? You have me chained to a bed. I admit, it's a pretty comfortable bed, but the chains aren't very comfy at all. You're a captive. You're lucky we don't have a dungeon, or you'd be there." Without saying anything further, the man left, closing the door behind him as he went, showing Naruto that it was a heavy iron door. Huffing, Naruto looked out through the window a few feet from his bed, finding that it had been at most a couple hours since he'd been caught. That wasn't good. He'd been away from the caravan for too long. For all he knew, they could have left, or been attacked already. He needed to do something. Before he could think of anything to do, the door to his room opened once more, and in stepped an old man wearing a very formal-looking male's kimono, using a cane to help keep upright. He looked nice enough, but looks could be deceiving. "Well, young man, would you mind telling me your name?" My name is Uzumaki Naruto. Now who are you? Who was that guy from before? Who you guys are will dictate my response to all this." The old man chuckled softly, seeming good-natured and all, but there was a hidden sharpness to his gaze as it locked onto Naruto. "My name is Tadawaki-shun. I am the leader of the group who runs and protects this town. We are a respectable group, who has given your home no reason to look in on us, nor come after us. Tell me, why is it you were following Nishiki earlier?" Naruto hummed, since the man had answered his question, so he guessed it was only fair that he answered the old man's. Though, he was a little embarrassed to admit to why he had been following the man, after learning that he apparently wasn't a bandit. "Well, to be honest, I thought he was some kind of bandit leader or something, with that tattoo of his. You see, I'm guarding a caravan right now, or at least I'm supposed to be, and the leader of it told me he had a bad feeling about this town. Then, while I was getting supplies, I ran into that man. Ashiki, was it? Anyway, I saw his tattoo as he was leaving the ramen stand, and figured he must have been some kind of, well, I already said what I thought he was. The old man blinked at the boy on the bed, before tossing his head back and laughing uproariously. Naruto blushed at the sound, and huffed, averting his gaze from the man and crossing his arms childishly. Hey, it was an honest mistake. Ya don't gotta laugh about it. My apologies, young man, it is just the first time one of us has been mistaken for a bandit leader or something before. No, we are not bandits. As I said, we are a group who runs and protects this town, as well as 2 other towns nearby. Ashiki is my most powerful member, and so stays close to protect me as I handle this town. Well, I wish I'd known that beforehand. Damn it. Anyway, I didn't actually do anything besides follow him, so no harm no foul, right? The boy looked sheepish, and Shun gave a small grin. Sure, no harm, no foul. However, I feel I must ask what it is you expect to do now. We received word that the caravan you were seen with is transporting some precious cargo, and that makes them a target for many. They won't be attacked as long as they are within the town. However, the moment they leave, they become prey for all those wishing to get at the cargo. Naruto winced a little before shaking his head. I don't care. It's my job to protect it. I was hired to do so, so I plan to protect that caravan with all that I have. The old man nodded, before turning back to the door. I'll send someone in quickly to unlock your binds, and you will then be led from the building. Go back to your caravan and protect it as you will, but remember, if you see someone with a tattoo for a number on them, they are part of my group. Also, one more thing before I send you off. Naruto blinked at this, tilting his head as the old man turned his head to look back at him as he left. Perhaps it would be in your best interest to find out just what it is that caravan is transporting. You may not like what you find, but it will say a lot about your character, whether you choose to continue protecting the caravan or not. Whether I choose to continue protecting the caravan or not. Just what did he mean by that? Surely our daimyo wouldn't be receiving something unscrupulous, would he? Damn, old man has me paranoid. Naruto shook his head of his thoughts as he sat atop the front wagon of the caravan, once more back with it. He was lucky that nothing had happened while he'd been away, and it didn't seem as if they'd been attacked, but the caravan leader had told him that the strange feeling hadn't gone away. In fact, he'd confided in Naruto that it seemed to get worse as they left town. Right now they were a few miles away from the town they'd just been in, and in terms of distance from now to the capital, they were still several towns away. Not even halfway to the next town yet, and Naruto was already dying to know what exactly he was protecting. Sighing and flopping back onto the wagon, looking up at the sky as the sun began to set, casting a beautiful glow over the horizon. However, it also cast many a shadow on the trees, as it slowly grew darker. Everyone was on alert, all except one man. The man who'd been selling books earlier in town. He looked like he was on guard, but Naruto could call that act for fake a mile away. This only increased the suspicion Naruto felt for the man, but it also made him want to know what he was protecting all the more. What was so valuable, or important, that someone working with the caravan would sell it out? Caravans were supposed to be like family, kinda, so why would one of their own sell them out, he wondered. He didn't get very long to ponder, as there was a sudden whistle from all around, and arrows suddenly descended upon the people of the caravan. Naruto's eyes widened, and he immediately went through hand seals. Shit, I'm not gonna make it. Suijin Heki. Before he could even finish the hand seals for his jutsu, a large wall of water quickly surrounded the caravan, blocking many of the arrows. It was thin, however, and a few managed to get through, some even managing to pierce some of the guards and other people walking with the caravan. The only ones truly safe were those inside the wagons. Eyes still wide, Naruto looked around for whoever had used the jutsu, and his eyes quickly fell on 4 people, though one was being held on the back of another, while the tallest had her arms on the ground, obviously the user of the jutsu. Ah, it's you guys. That's right, this is part of our mission too. That warehouse. It was a trap. Only a few people were even there, and one of my genin was injured when we fell into the trap. But we're here to continue the mission, injured or not. You just leave these bandits to use, only interfere if they get past us, got it? Sweating a bit at the woman's harsh words, he gave a quick nod, but hopped off the wagon he'd been riding anyway. Quickly moving to the group, he took the injured furry from Takashi's back. I'll look after her, patch her up a little. You guys go take care of these damn bandits. The trio nodded, grateful that their teammate would be taken care of, before they disappeared into the trees to hunt down the bandits, splitting up to do so. While they did that, Naruto made some cage bunshin to gather up the rest of the people who'd been injured, and began to use some medical supplies he had in a scroll to patch them up. The ones hit with arrows were easier to do, but the genin in the trench coat was a little harder. She showed signs of having been caught in an explosion, and had several cuts along her body. He cleaned and bandaged her as best he could, but she wouldn't make it if he didn't do something. His eyes went wide again as he remembered something from his mother's journal, the one she wrote for him. It told of an ability his clan had, though it would be somewhat risky for him to do it due to what he was. It wasn't dangerous, per se, but, shaking his head, he pushed up the sleeve of his jacket, and placed the injured genin's head in his lap, before pushing his arm against her lips and bending down to whisper to her. "I need you to bite down, Furry-san, otherwise you won't make it much longer. Please, bite down, and suck hard." His urgent whispers seemed to make it to the girl, for moments later, her lips parted and her teeth sunk into his arm, followed by a suction that inverted her cheeks a bit. Naruto winced at the bite, but quickly felt his chakra being drained through the bite, not that the amount drained itself was noticeable, since he had so much. But he certainly noticed the girl sucking his chakra, and saw steam coming from her bandages as she healed rapidly. Her cheeks also flushed and he caught a very distinct and familiar scent beginning to come from her body, so after a few more seconds he quickly took his arm from her with a small smirk and blush. Fanning her face a bit, he looked up finally and gave a small glare out into the trees. Hopefully the Jonin and her remaining genin could take care of the bandits, but if any got past them, there was going to be much bloodshed. Lying Furry's head down upon the ground, Naruto stood up and gave a small stretch, before creating a few more cage bunshin to form a perimeter around the caravan. Once they were in place, he hopped back up onto the middle wagon and waited. For now he would trust his fellow Konoha ninja, and only should they fail would he interfere. As would be expected, there was quite quickly screams starting on either side of the caravan, the forest on either side of the trail quickly erupting into a cacophony of screams. A lot of the people with the caravan were huddled together for protection, and the remaining guards were focusing solely on the tree lines. However, Naruto noticed one person who, though he seemed genuinely freaked now, was actually trying to sneak off with something large on his back. However, for this man, the man who'd been selling books earlier, nothing was going to go as he had planned. Naruto was going to make sure of it. Grinning, he stepped towards the man, as this would likely also satisfy his curiosity. He leapt from the wagon he was on, landing with a purposely loud thud before the man. This drew a loud cry from him, drawing everyone's attention as Naruto placed a hand on his shoulder. "So, would you mind telling me what you've got there? I'm quite sure you aren't supposed to have it, and though I'm probably not supposed to know what it is, you having it likely outweighs that at the moment. So, enlighten me, just where were you going with whatever that is?" The leader of the caravan hustled his way to them, face red with anger, but also tinged with a bit of regret. "Michi, what the hell are you doing? You know you aren't supposed to be messing around with the cargo, and where the hell were you going with it anyway?" The man, now identified as Michi, was sweating now, as Naruto had started to slowly squeeze his shoulder, making him wince. I was just, save it, Ninja-san, I apologize for this, but would it be too much to ask if you just forgot about this? I'll just put what he was trying to take back, and have the guards sort him out later." "Oh, come off it, Kunamoto. You don't want the new guy knowing what we're hauling? If I'm going to die for this, I might as well show him, right? Here." Before he could be stopped, the man tore the cloth covering what he was carrying away, revealing a cage covered in shoddy seal tags. It was what was inside the cage that made Naruto release the man and step away in shock, however. There in the cage, grouped together and holding each other in fear, wearing tattered little clothes, were tiny female creatures, some with wings and some without. Each one looked as if, had they not been where they were, they would have been unnaturally pretty. Are those? Sigh. Yes, these are fairies. The daimyo heard about them, and wanted some to show his status, as they are exceedingly hard to find, much less capture. However, a small community of them was found recently, and though I pray that the daimyo didn't order it, they were attacked and rounded up. We were then ordered to bring them to him, so here we are. Naruto was speechless, and he had reason to be. These little beings were technically as rare as he was now, and here they were being taken away from their homes, off to some strange place they'd never been, to be held captive as a sign of status. His fists clenched in rage. Calming himself quickly, he turned a sharp gaze on the two men, Michi and Kunamoto. They stiffened at the look, and the guards now had their hands on their weapons, in case the boy did anything, though they knew they may not have much of a chance against him. When we get to the capital, I'm going to speak to the fire daimyo on behalf of the fairies. How many more are there? Michi and Kunamoto looked at each other, before the latter turned back to Naruto, nervous about speaking up, though he did so anyway. There are several cages in each wagon, and the people riding in them feed the fairies. Most haven't eaten for a while. It's why we haven't stayed long in the towns or villages we stopped at so far. We fear they may perish if we don't get them to the daimyo quickly. Growling softly, Naruto gave a small nod, leaning down and picking up the cage holding the fairies who'd been revealed to him. Let me speak with the fairies while we go. I can get them to eat, and when we get to the capital, I'll negotiate with the daimyo to have them released. He can find a less sapient creature to show his status with. The caravan was on the move again. It had been a week since they had been attacked by the first set of bandits. The team of Konoha ninja had already completed their mission and gone home, and Naruto had protected the caravan from every other bandit attack since then. His displays of power each time had made those in the caravan cautious of him, but he had done as he said he could, and had gotten the fairies to eat when they were traveling. Naruto was the only one the fairies would speak to, as well, and even then only when the others had left the wagon in which they were speaking. Now, as the gates of the capital city, Yoto-en came into view, everyone in the caravan let out sighs of relief. Soon the journey would be over, they'd have done their job, gotten paid for it, and then they'd be able to get out of the city, free to go back to business as usual. Despite how he felt about the cargo being taken to the fire daimyo, Naruto couldn't help but be amazed at the walls and gates surrounding the city. It looked almost as large as Konoha, possibly even larger, and was quite grand from what he could see. He wasn't able to go up and have a look, because he didn't want to freak anyone out, but he'd get to see the inside soon enough. That time came quickly, and Naruto soon found himself in awe at the capital city. The buildings were large and clean, there were many people walking around, and there were plenty of shops lining the streets. It was everything he'd expect of a large city, and if possible, it seemed larger than Konoha was. If he were honest with himself, he was like a child in a candy shop, and more than once he had to focus himself as pretty women constantly gave him odd looks. Heck, some teenaged girls gave him the same looks as he walked along with the caravan, and though he was pretty sure he liked the looks, it was strange that they kept giving them to him when he hadn't done anything yet. He still had his glasses on, and he was suppressing his incubi presence. So why was he getting so many looks? Shrugging it off, Naruto focused on the matter at hand as they drew closer to the center of the city, where the fire daimyo's estate was. The sight of it made Naruto blanch at the richness of it, seeing many things rich people were thought to have stereotypically. Namely, there were plenty of servants milling about, there were guards everywhere, and he could swear he caught sight of people disappearing into the shadows. So he had the servants, the super huge house, the guards, and the hidden protectors. From the looks of the people that came to greet the caravan, he also had samurai. Sighing, Naruto crossed his arms behind his head as he looked around as Kunamoto spoke with a middle-aged samurai decked out in full armor. That couldn't have been comfortable. And the boy here, he's a ninja I hired on to protect the caravan. He wishes to have an audience with the daimyo, if it wouldn't be too much trouble. Blinking as he heard his name, Naruto stepped forward and gave a salute to what appeared to be the head samurai, standing at attention. The man looked him over, before seeming to recognize him. Yes, the Hokage has sent word to our daimyo about this boy. He was very interested in meeting him, though the Hokage had stated that he could not steer the boy on his journey. It seems Lady Luck has smiled upon our daimyo in doing it for the Sandame. Tilting his head a bit, wondering just why the daimyo of all people would want to meet him, Naruto shook his head before giving a small nod. Yes, since it seems he would like to meet me himself, I take it I'll get to have an audience with Daimyo-sama while I am here? The man gave a small smirk. Indeed. But first we will need to check in all your weapons, and swap out your clothing for a special outfit to seal off your chakra. You may be a loyal Konoha shinobi, but we are taking no chances. That means your fancy forehead protector will have to go as well once you are within the mansion. Naruto blinked, before pouting a bit. Really? Damn it, I get super hungry when my chakra is low. How is it going to be with it sealed? Sighing and lifting his arms to inspect his new clothes, Naruto gave a small pout at what he was wearing now. It was a large white haori, and a quite puffy pair of dark blue hakama, both of which had holes in the proper places for his tail, surprisingly enough. Even his footwear had been replaced, a simple pair of straw sandals being worn in their place. I apologize if it doesn't suit you, but we don't have access to any seal masters. The most our people could come up with were a set of clothing with seals stitched into them that will seal a person's chakra when the full set is worn. Still, I am quite amazed that you actually have horns and a tail. I admit that I had thought the former were just a decoration. I had not even noticed the latter till now. Turning to look at the head samurai, his guide to his meeting with the fire daimyo, Naruto simply shrugged. It would have come out sooner or later. That's okay. I have a feeling it's why Daimyo-sama wants to see me anyway. It's quite a bit of serendipity that I came to see him myself actually. Anyway, shall we go? The man simply nodded before turning and beginning to walk, Naruto following him as they exited the room where he left all his equipment and original clothing, including the jacket Kurenai had given him. The only thing he had been allowed to keep was his glasses. They'd even made him change underwear. As they walked, Naruto was taking notice of every single female they passed, and every few they did pass would make his stomach rumble. It was just as he had thought. The moment his chakra had been sealed off, his hunger had increased, as well as the urge to take the nearest female to feed. He ignored that though, as it wouldn't do to go and have all the daimyo's courtesans for lunch, as it were. It certainly wouldn't be proper to be found doing it either, it wouldn't be a silent affair. Finally, however, they arrived at a pair of large double doors, made of some kind of heavy wood, possibly mahogany. The head samurai had Naruto stay put at the door as he went in himself, leaving the blonde there simply waiting. And waiting, hearing and feeling his stomach rumble as hunger gnawed at him, Naruto blanched a bit and rubbed his belly through his clothes. Don't worry, stomach. I'll feed you as soon as I'm done with my business here. I'll head right over to the red light district for some good eats. In the process of comforting his stomach, Naruto hadn't noticed the door opening, till a clearing throat was heard, causing the boy to look up at the head samurai, who had a deadpan expression. The blonde had the decency to look sheepish, at least, rubbing the back of his head as he straightened up. Yes, well, please come in, Daimyo-sama will see you now. But please behave yourself, do you understand? Naruto simply gave a nod and entered into the room as the head samurai held the door open for him. Of course, no sooner than the door had closed than did the head samurai push down on his head, leaning in to whisper to him, "Bow before Daimyo-sama, don't be rude." Our blonde Incubus grumbled a bit but complied easily enough, giving a small bow towards the man behind the screen curtain. Uzumaki Naruto, I thank you for coming to my city to see me, though I doubt it is for the reason I wish to see you. I shall go first, then I shall hear what you have to say, understood? Naruto nodded his head and moved to sit in Caesar before straightening up to look at the daimyo, sitting with his legs crossed behind the weird screen, curtain thing. I understand, Daimyo-sama, what is it you wish to see me about? The man behind the curtain seemed to contemplate something for a few moments, before giving a small nod. First, bring out your wings. Hokage-san's reports said you had them. Sweat dropping a bit, Naruto did as told, all 6 of his wings appearing flared out behind him, completing his look with his tail and horns. Most impressive young man, indeed, in the right lighting and clothing you would strike a terrifying countenance. However, I see you are wearing our special clothing for those who wield chakra. How is it you are able to call upon your wings? Are they not tied into your chakra? Shaking his head, the blonde boy opened his mouth to speak, before stopping and looking to the head samurai, said man having taken up a spot next to him, sitting Caesar the same as him. The man gave a nod, and Naruto turned back to the daimyo. No, Daimyo-sama, my wings, tail and horns don't need chakra to appear or stay upon my person. I have a second source of energy due to being what I am, and it is equally as large as my reserves of chakra, growing with me as it does. I have called this energy Incubus energy, as it is simple and easy to remember. The daimyo seemed pleased with this, though if anything the head samurai seemed a little disconcerted at this news. Permission to speak, Daimyo-sama? The man behind the curtain screen nodded, his shadowy figure placing a hand to his chin. Turning to Naruto, the head samurai gave a small nod of his head towards the boy, who returned it and turned to address him as well. Uzumaki-san, tell me, this second energy of yours, Do you have any attacks you can perform with it that we should know about? To the man's dismay, the blonde nodded his head. Only one, and it's fairly obvious when I'm using it. I call it Hao Shometsu, and it is an area of effect attack. At the moment, it is my most destructive technique, while taking about as much energy as an A-rank jutsu. However, you need not worry, I am a loyal shinobi of Konoha. I give my word that none of my attacks or combat skills shall ever find themselves aimed at Daimyo-sama or his home. The conviction in the blonde's voice seemed to convince the daimyo, but the head samurai looked just a bit unnerved. However, he put it behind him, as it were. How powerful could a child's technique be? Back to me, please, both of you. I still have things to say to our young ninja here. Hi, Daimyo-sama. X2. Both turned back towards the daimyo, giving small bows towards the man behind the curtain screen thing. Uzumaki-san, I have a favor to ask of you if you would hear it. Blinking, Naruto nodded after a moment. Of course, Daimyo-sama, I am a ninja of your country after all. Ask, and if it is in my power, I shall carry it out. I am glad to hear it. My request is simple, and you shall be rewarded for it should you succeed. You see, in the last several years, the Wind Daimyo has been diverting missions from Suna to Konoha. While I am quite happy to see the extra income for my village, I am quite concerned as to the reason. I wish for you to travel to Kase no Kuni and meet with the Wind Daimyo, convince her to begin sending missions back to her own village, for the sake of balance among our two villages. Naruto was quite honestly surprised, not shocked, just surprised. Stopping a source of missions was certainly not something he had expected the Fire Daimyo to ask him. If I may ask, Daimyo-sama, why would you have me of all people perform this task? Surely there are more people with greater skill than I in the ways of diplomacy? It is because of what you are, young man. Several years ago, the Wind Daimyo was succeeded by his daughter, whom I hear is a woman of great beauty. Yet, I also hear she is prideful, arrogant, and cold-hearted. She cares nothing for the people of her own hidden village, it seems, though to go so far as to send most of their missions here. There is one more detail that makes me believe you would be the best suited for this task. While happy that the Wind Daimyo was a woman, which would make the task incredibly easy for him, he was quite curious as to what the other thing was. He was an incubus, something not seen in generations, so not many should have defenses against his abilities, so what else could there be that would help in his task? I hear she is also a fan of a certain book that came out recently, a book containing a mythical creature this world has not seen for quite some time, one that suddenly sprang out as a bestseller. I'm sure you know what book I speak of, Mr. Author. Naruto chuckled sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head as the daimyo's silhouette brought out a certain purple book from his robes. Yes, I am the author of the Incubus series of books. On a related note, I could sign that for you if you'd like, Daimyo-sama. No, that's perfectly alright. This is my wife's actually, and wouldn't she just be so heartbroken to know she missed such a chance? Perhaps she might even leave that poor cat of hers alone for a while, no? Daimyo-sama, so devious tilde. Both Blonde Ninja and Daimyo gave a brief chuckle, before the former shook his head and gave a small bow towards the man behind the curtain screen thing. Daimyo-sama, I shall accept the task you have given me. However, I would like to make a request of you in turn, if it isn't too much trouble? Go ahead my boy, though do note, if I find what you ask to be too much I shall disregard it. Sweat dropping a little, Naruto nodded his head before taking a slow, deep breath and giving a small bow towards the daimyo. I would like to request the freedom of the cargo you received not too long ago. By chance I found out what it was, and believe it wrong to cage and attempt to own them, so I humbly request that they be released. I will do whatever is asked of me to ensure that this happens. Oh, and just what did I receive today that you believe I should set free? I have been told that I was getting a group of rare creatures that would highlight my status. Not even I have been told just what they are, so enlighten me young man, just what are you bartering the freedom of? I hardly think you would make such an offer for some rare beasts. Naruto was fully aware of what he had just offered. I will do whatever is asked of me, was an offer that could be used in a great number of ways. He was simply trusting that the daimyo of his country wasn't the type to use the offer in the more outrageous of them. I am aware, however, the rare beasts you have recently received are not true beasts, as you are right. I would not make such an offer for something non-sapient and possibly dangerous. I would merely advise caution in such a case. No, what you have received are a group of fairies, taken from their home forcefully, and relocated here, no doubt far from their real home. The only reason I didn't free them personally is because I was told before I learned of what they are just where they were going. I wish for their freedom, yes, but I cannot do anything about it if I myself am behind bars or worse for trifling with a package for the daimyo of my country. The fire daimyo hummed softly at the news, though behind the curtain screen thing his eyes were quite wide at what he had learned. He had unwittingly authorized what basically amounted to kidnapping of the fair folk, powerful beings of magic in old times, and no doubt just as powerful in this day and age. I see. While true, owning them would certainly show my status, it would also bring down great misfortune upon me and my people. Tosa, have the nobleman who suggested them to me questioned thoroughly. If he knew of what he was suggesting I have captured, have him stripped and whipped in the East Square. Naruto gulped as the head samurai gave a nod, promising to do so no sooner than the meeting was finished. He hadn't meant to get someone in such trouble, even a no doubt snobbish noble, but if he indeed knew what he was talking about when he suggested the fairies be captured, his punishment was well deserved, if not a little light. There were tales of the old days, during the warring clans era, about the vengeance of the Phi, for far lighter things than kidnapping an entire community of them. Whole families spirited away, communities beset by misfortune or sickness. They dared not think of what may befall them should the fairies choose to retaliate. I will relinquish the fair folk to you before you leave young Uzumaki, give them my condolences, and I pray none have perished due to my thoughtlessness in acquiring them. Even I am not fool enough to think I could get away with kidnapping a community of them without recourse, and had I known they were my cargo, I would have never ordered their capture in the first place. Naruto grinned and gave a small bow towards the daimyo. I thank you, daimyo-sama. I am sure I can divert any misfortune or what have you from coming from this incident. The fairies will surely understand you had not known you were having them captured. However, to be safe, I believe I shall go ahead and tell them it was that noble who had them captured for you. Very well, I thank you, young man. Now, Tosa will lead you back to where you can change back into your own clothing. Can you do me another, smaller favor in the meantime? Keep your wings out, so as to allow the people of Fire Country to get used to you. You need not hide in your own home, young man. Naruto grinned again, before giving a small salute. Asu. I'll keep at least one pair out at all times. It's a relief that I don't have to get used to hiding them. I admit I'd been doing just that after I started my journey. Ahaha, well, fear not. I believe your books have helped a lot with any problems people may have with you. Though, I cannot say much about the men who may have their lovers' eyes drawn to you. Rubbing the back of his head sheepishly, the blonde Incubus simply chuckled a bit and nodded his head, before the daimyo spoke to him once more. Now, please wait outside the door while I speak with Tosa for a moment. He shan't be long, do not worry. I won't keep you from your tasks or your journey. Naruto nodded and stood, before giving a bow towards the daimyo, and slipping out of the room to wait on the other side of the large doors. After waiting a few minutes outside, actively trying to not listen in on the conversation going on inside, he was joined once more by Tosa the head samurai. The man led him back to the room holding his clothes, but strangely enough he left the room this time instead of simply waiting for him to change behind the shoji partition. Shrugging his shoulders, the blonde stripped out of the haori and hakama, folding them neatly and setting them on the bench in the room with the straw sandals atop of them. It was as he was removing the fundoshi he'd been given in the place of his own underwear that the door opened again, before closing quickly. Naruto, chakra no longer sealed now that he wasn't wearing the special outfit, was quick to turn around on the defensive, though the flare of chakra he'd prepared crapped out at the sight of the incredibly beautiful woman whom greeted him. Hello there, cutie. My name is Fuki. A pleasure to meet you, Tilda. Or at least, it will be. Tilda Daimyo-sama has given me the task of tending to you before you leave. I'll be sure to treat you very well, Tilda. Letting out a sigh as he finally left the fire daimyo's home, Naruto had quite a large grin on his face as he made his way towards the caravan, which looked to be taking the cargo it had brought to a large building to the left of the daimyo's mansion, just a bit away from it even. It was very likely a storage shed of sorts, and he immediately began to help, not just with the cargo he really cared about, but with everything else. It seemed the caravan had brought supplies as well as the fairies. Once he was done, he was handed a small scroll along with a pen, making him blink. Kunamoto simply raised an eyebrow at him. It's your mission contract, kid. You gonna sign it or not? Once you do, you'll get your pay and we'll send this off to Konoha so they can log it for ya. Naruto suddenly remembered what the man was talking about, before accepting the scroll and using one of his wings as a surface to sign it, before rolling it back up and handing it back to the caravan leader. The man smiled and handed Naruto a rolled-up bundle of ryo, before ruffling his hair and walking off towards his wagon. The blonde simply huffed at that last action, and fixed his hair before making his way towards the storage shed where the fairies had been taken. Once he was inside, he closed the doors behind him and looked around while walking towards the center of the room, where the cages holding the fairies had been stacked. Giving a sad look, the blonde began to tear the ofuda off the cages, the little female creatures within staring at him with hope in their eyes. Once the last ofuda was off, he used his hands and tail to begin opening the doors of the cages. They were stacked in such a way that this was possible without any being left closed. Asu, I got you all set free. The fire daimyo sends his condolences, and is having the guy who suggested you guys be captured under the guise of rare creatures questioned. Depending on his answer, the man will be stripped and whipped in the East Square if you want to hang around and watch it. If not, well, you're free to do whatever you want now. The fairies all slowly floated up into the air around him, even the ones without wings, giving him the impression that their magic was quite strong for such a feat, even if they were quite small. One of the group, the one he'd learned to be the leader of the colony named Aki, floated towards his face and gave an appreciative smile. We thank you, young Uzumaki-kun, for gaining us our freedom back, for not allowing us to be kept as pets. Naruto shook his head quickly. No, you don't need to thank me. Just don't hold it against Daimyo-sama. We talked, and he didn't even know you were fairies. The impression I got was that he would have had you released immediately after finding out. Technically he did, even. The eldest fairy, though she by no means looked old at all, gave a small frown, but that's no good. The not thanking you part, not the other one. We absolutely must thank you in some way for helping us in this dire time. Ah, I know. Aki turned to her fellow Phi, before beckoning a small group of them, 10 out of the 50 that had been captured. Turning back to Naruto once the small group was surrounding him, she gave him a bright smile. This is my colony's Imago Creationist group. They are responsible for the creation of items, mainly our homes. And this, turning around once more, the tiny woman called forth another group of the gathered fairies, 15 this time. This is my colony's Incantatio Circulus group. They are in charge of enchantments, mostly the ones that prevent us from being found in our homes, though they are capable of so much more than that, I assure you. What I propose we reward you with is a small token of our gratitude, a mobile home, refuge of sorts. Something you can carry with you, easily hide, and use whenever you want. Naruto blinked, tilting his head a bit. Ah, that sounds nice, but you really don't have to do so much for me. I didn't do this for a reward, and I kind of already feel dirty for taking that man's money after escorting them here with you all. Aki floated forward and placed a hand on one of the blonde's whiskered cheeks, making him blush slightly, having not expected it. And that is why we wish to reward you, and if you cannot accept a reward, think of it as a gift. You'll accept a gift now, won't you? Sighing softly, the blonde Incubus gave a small smile and finally nodded his head, rubbing the back of it sheepishly. Hey. Well, when you put it like that, it's not like I can properly deny your kindness. But just what are you planning on giving me anyway? The head fairy woman gave a small grin, before gesturing towards the group of 10 fairies, who all waved at him with small smiles. He imagined, despite how pretty they were even in tattered clothing, they would have made even his face look like a boiled lobster if they'd been properly clothed and possibly bathed. This group, the Imago Creationist group, or Creation Circle group in translation, will be forming a circulus mediocris or fairy circle to create the home, refuge, in this case a fair-sized glass container with a miniature house inside. Afterwards, the Incantatio Circulus group will be forming a circulus mediocris themselves and enchanting the new creation. We will go all out on this one for our rescuer, right girls? A surprisingly loud cry of, Asu, came from the combined groups, and Naruto found himself suddenly wanting to hug the fairies for their kindness. Though, he also had the desire to not squish them, so he held himself back for their sakes. The first process actually went fairly quickly, the group of 10 gathering in a circle, each one spaced a few inches apart from each other. The circle of fairies began to slowly spin, Before, in a bright flash that could no doubt likely be seen through the windows in the storage shed, Naruto was left looking at a gaggle of giggling fairies. And there, in the middle of the circle of fairies, sat a glass orb about the size of a large watermelon. It wasn't the orb he was staring at, however, it was the fucking huge tower within it. Because that's all the large building in the center of the orb could be called. It was large, reaching from the bottom of the orb to almost the top, and cylindrical in shape, with a long walkway extending from the building to the edge of the glass. At the bottom of the glass orb, it had what looked like an expansive beach that spanned all the way around the huge, wide tower in the middle. While the layout is pretty standard, the quality is superb, and the size is quite grand. It might be a little lonely at first, but I'm sure you'll find a way to fix that. Now, as it is right now, it's just a fancy model in a closed case, but once our other team gets done with it, it will be ready for use. And in case you were wondering, yes, this is how we create our own houses. Unfortunately, it can only be done one by one, but the process doesn't take very long, so it's alright. Naruto nodded his head, thoroughly fascinated with the item that had been made for him, and the quality of it, though he had many questions as well, such as how he would fit, for the most part, and if all of it was real, and what scale it truly was. That's really amazing though. How did you make the water and the beach even? I mean, I know it's technically just a little bit of water and sand right now, but… Aki gave a mischievous little giggle at the boy's question, covering her mouth with her fingers daintily. You'll see for yourself how large they truly are once you are able to enter it. As for how it was made, there is a very old saying that we made for humans who don't already know about magic, much less how to use it. No offense, but it's magic, I don't have to explain tits. The tittering of the gathered fairies made Naruto sweat drop, before grumbling softly and crossing his arms with a huff. Quietly motioning for the second group of fairies to begin their own work, Aki began to explain just what they were doing to the glass orb and the environment contained within. What they are now doing to the new item with their fairy circle is imbuing it with special properties, though it will take a bit longer than the creation of the item itself. It's far more complicated and a little convoluted too. Basically, they are making it habitable, speeding up the time inside compared to out here. Saturating it with magic, and with a bit of your blood, they will make it so you control some properties once you enter. Theoretically, a day inside will be equal to an hour out here, though the small downside to that is that you cannot leave once you've entered before a day inside has passed already. Don't worry about lighting or anything either, artificial sunlight and moonlight will be generated at the appropriate times while inside. Naruto was speechless. Such a thing, even if it was just the basic function, was something people would quite literally kill for. The only thing better than what was being made would be if there was something where someone could stay in for a year and only like a day or so would pass on the outside. Wishful thinking, he guessed. Wow, all that's really happening? What about that bit with my blood? Should I give it to them now? Aki giggled, and he could swear he heard the same sound from the slowly spinning circle of enchanter fairies. Yes, that would probably be the best. Just be a deer and reach under them, and drip a bit of blood onto the glass. They will key it to your blood so that certain properties will be controlled by you. The blonde nodded and reached up to bite at his index finger, pricking it with a fang before kneeling down and reaching under the circle of tiny women, focusing on the glass orb they were moving around. With a small squeeze of his finger, several drops of blood dropped onto the glass, sizzling shortly after. Stepping back once he'd done so, Naruto licked the remaining blood from his finger as the tiny wound sealed up quickly after. Looking to Aki, the tiny woman gave him a thumbs up, before looking back to the fairy circle currently enchanting the glass orb. With a small smile, knowing what she said next would likely baffle the boy, she placed a hand to her cheek and floated a little closer to him. On top of everything else, and being incredibly hard to break, the properties of the inside are a bit special. Well, more special than the existing properties anyway. Within the item, you will have the power to lift any restrictions placed upon someone, refill your reserves of energy completely though only while within the item itself, and magically repair any damage done to any part of the inside environment and building. Of course, there are also downsides to this, as with most things. For instance, the time abilities of the item are quite real. Spending, say, a month inside the item will be the same as spending it out here. You will really age an entire month. Naturally, that makes it a bit of a double-edged sword for age-conscious people. Naruto chuckled and shook his head a bit, He could definitely see how that would be troublesome. You could lose track of your own birthday if you stayed in the thing too long, and you'd only get older the longer you stayed in. He knew some women who would absolutely hate that. By the time the enchanting of his new house, Large Tower Resort, was finished, Naruto had been playing a card game with some of the other fairies off to the side a bit. Once he saw the light of the magic die down, he pulled a watch from his pocket and blinked in surprise when it showed that a whole hour had passed. Aki promptly floated over near his face with a smile, hands on her little hips. "Well, your new abode is finished, and I've talked with a few of the others while you were playing your card game with some of us, and we've come to a small decision. You, Uzumaki Naruto, shall have this colony's favor for quite some time. To show you that, we've decided on another small token that will allow you to get in contact with us wherever you should find yourself, no matter your distance from us." Blinking, Naruto blushed a bit at that, and waved his hands a bit. "Gosh, Aki-san, you're spoiling me, you know? I'm just a simple incubus, I don't really need anything else, though I won't deny the offer of communication between us. It would be rude if I did, and I get the feeling you'd probably sneak whatever it is into my belongings before you left if I did as well." The tiny woman's grin did nothing to disprove his little theory. Sighing softly as he went about resupplying himself after leaving the fire daimyo's estate, Naruto gave a small lopsided smile as he hefted the backpack on his back that was holding his gift from the fairies. The sun was setting, and the fairies had already evacuated the city, while he himself had already been to 4 stores to resupply on food and other traveling supplies. Despite the redundancy of it now, he even bought a tent, because he was fairly certain he didn't want to spend all of his time inside his new portable, Uber-training-capable home. He was also fairly sure that he would have to be very selective about who he let know that he even had it. Some might try to take it from him, and others would abuse the hell out of it or something. Shaking his head, the blonde looked up at the sky, wrought with beautiful colors as the sun slowly set. He had gotten a request from the fire daimyo, freed the fairies who'd been wrongly brought to his estate, and gotten a really kick-ass gift from them for doing it. Even if the task the daimyo gave him ended up blowing more than being kicked in the balls, he figured it would all even out, what with the super gift and the new supposed alliance with a fairy colony he had. Shaking his head, he looked around and then shot up onto a rooftop with a single leap, surprising some of the civilians roaming around. It wasn't every day you saw someone doing that outside of a hidden village after all. With a relatively short trek, the blonde found himself outside of the city, now jumping through the trees as he headed towards the border of Hai no Kuni and Kase no Kuni. The capital of the former wasn't that far from the border, several hours of good old-fashioned ninja-styled travel if he had to guess. Of course, the speed of said travel really made a difference, and with his speed in the trees being at least Chunin level, he figured he'd make it in about 12 hours. And damn, what a boring 12 hours it was. Maybe he would have been better off flying? By the time he made it to the border, an area of land between Hai no Kuni and Kase no Kuni that was covered in sand and trees, not quite a desert yet, but not quite strictly a forest still either, it was in the early, wee hours of the morning. Sighing and looking around, the blonde giggled like a little schoolgirl as he took the magic castle the fairies had given him out of the backpack on his back. Finding a good, large tree with a sizable enough hole near the bottom, Naruto fit the glass orb into it with the walkway, bridge of the cylindrical castle in the middle pointing towards him. Once it was set, he pulled a camouflage tarp patterned like a tree trunk from his hip pouch and unfolded it, before sticking it over the hole in the tree, and simply standing in front of it. After a moment, he disappeared as if slowly dissolving in a flash of light, a shit-eating grin on his face as he giddily waited to be fully warped into his kick-ass new portable home. "Sorry it's taking so long to get past the boring stuff, I've been really distracted lately. Anyway, I don't reckon this is even halfway past the adventure yet, so there's that. I'll try to spice it up. Also, if you're wondering, yes, I did take the diorama from Mahu-sensei Nagima, Evangeline's magical resort of super badassery, to me anyway. It's really awesome, and I've been trying to hold myself back from breaking away from this to write a crossover of that, so I added this to tide myself over till I get to chapter 10. Note over, sorry for the pause." By the time Naruto exited his awesome new mini-home, which turned out to be not so mini, fucking huge, on the inside, the blonde decided that nothing could really mess up his mood, no matter what it happened to be trying to do so. Taking a look at the sun now making its way slowly towards the middle of the sky, and even knowing it was going to be hot as balls, the boy shrugged and made all 3 sets of his wings reappear as he packed up the awesome new mini home. As he jumped up into the sky, carrying his backpack with the mini home inside in his arms instead of on his back, he began to think about all the training he had gotten done while inside his portable home. He had done a bit of weight training with the weights guy had gotten him, started practicing the Rasengan, the move Kakashi had given him instructions for, he'd even gotten down the first step, and finally he'd taken some time to practice phasing through things with the power he'd discovered his jacket had. Painfully enough, he had found out he couldn't phase through attacks with it. He learned that the hard way. Unable to wash the smile off his face as he flew through the sky, Naruto made it a point to keep note of his surroundings, even if he was really giddy about his new porta home. Like a kid who just got the coolest new toy on the market. It was this diligence at keeping track of his surroundings, even if it was a bit forced in his giddy state, that saved him when a thick rope net suddenly shot at him from behind a particularly large dune. Stopping in midair and quickly shifting his backpack to his tail, he pulled a kunai from his pouch and sliced the next net to come at him into pieces. Thinking quickly before any more nets could be shot at him and possibly ensnare him, thereby causing him to drop and possibly break his new porta home, Naruto landed and created 5 clones. He handed one clone his porta home, before sending the other 4 off around the dune, 2 to either side of it. As for him, he simply dashed straight forward and plowed right through the damn thing with a roar that threw up a cloud of sand as he did so. When he broke through the other side, his clones were already making short work of a group of men all wearing tan shirts and brown pants that ballooned out at the ankles and stopped just around there as well, with dark brown boots. Each one had a cloth hanging over their face and a pair of goggles to cover their eyes, with some sort of headgear covering the tops of their heads. Ah man, he wasn't going to need something like that for the desert, was he? Grabbing the nearest man to him as he broke through the dune, Naruto spun him around and tossed him into the nearest grouping of men. His clones meanwhile were smashing through the guys like so much wet paper, batting away swung swords or thrust spears, before simply punching or palm striking them with enough force to blow them away. The original meanwhile, after throwing away the first guy, set his sights on the large wooden net launcher they had used to try and ambush him from behind the dune. Some of the men saw where he was looking, and laughed as they blocked his path. One of them with a spider web carved into his headgear spoke up then, drawing Naruto's attention. "You're putting up an admirable fight, boy, but there are too many of us for you to take down." "Huh, and you think you can do something about our launchers?" "Sorry, but you won't be using those fancy wings to be flying out of here anytime soon, kid. Get him." Rolling his eyes, the blonde simply sidestepped the first man, his tail shooting around his thigh, before he grabbed the second man by his face and spun, throwing the first with his tail, and as he came around simply smashing the back of the second man's head against one of the 5 charging at him. Obviously they were selectively blind, not able to see his clones trashing the rest of the guys. Grumbling a bit about the idiocy of men who decided to take up crime for a living, Naruto strolled over to the net launcher as casually as if he were just taking an evening stroll. Meanwhile, his clones were almost done with the rest of the bandits, judging by their cries of pain, pleas of mercy, and a particularly urgent call of, "Arm doesn't bend that way. Arm doesn't bend that way." Naruto ignored the following crack that he somehow heard from where he was as he dug his fingers into the wood of the device. "Ah, now it does." Shaking his head, the blonde gave a small hup, and with a simple heave, tossed the large wooden net launcher into the air. Every single man who was conscious enough to see the feat had their eyes damn near popping out of their skulls. They only widened further as all at once, 5 beams of a dark red energy lanced out and destroyed the construct. Dispelling his clones after destroying the net launcher, Naruto looked around at the groaning men laid out across the sands, a small sweat drop as he did this. Perhaps him and his clones were a bit too efficient? Nah, they had tried to catch him in a net. They deserved a few broken bones. Plus they were bandits most like. Whistling a small tune as he made his way over to a man who was sobbing and clutching between his legs, Naruto shook his head and reached for the man beside him, who was simply groaning. Otherwise he looked fine, so Naruto figured he'd gotten away with some relatively minor injuries compared to the rest. Particularly the guy whose arm one of his clones had broken. Picking him up by the back of his shirt, He gave a little shake to get the man's attention. Of course, a little shake for him basically jostled the man around like a rag doll. Tell me why I shouldn't make you like your friend here? If that net had snagged me, what was to stop me from breaking something important, huh? I know it's just sand, but I could have fallen on my head, I could have broken a wing. Calming himself down before he got too enthusiastic about shaking the man, he held him still by the shoulders so he could let the man talk without having to decipher his words due to the man being shaken. When the man whispered, Naruto leaned in to hear him, only to receive a headbutt to the face. Of course, it didn't go as the man had planned, as instead of harming Naruto, the boy had simply let the man's forehead smash against his forehead protector and the base of his horns. Sufficiently dazed, the blonde huffed and dropped the man, and moved on to the next marginally okay one. Picking him up by his shoulders, he gave him a good shake too. Why'd you try to catch me in those nets? Not getting an answer fast enough for his liking, he kneed the man in the gut before dropping him to lose his lunch all over the sand. Scrunching his face in disgust, he made his way along to each man he could find that looked okay enough to talk. Each one seemed reluctant to talk, at least till he started kneeing them a little lower. By the fifth guy, he started yelling before the blonde even got his hands on him. Smart choice after the last guy pissed himself from a knee to the bladder. Possibly even a cracked pelvis. We thought you were some super rare hawk man with 3 sets of wings. Please don't knee me in the junk. I need those still. The man began sobbing and cradling his jewels while curling into a ball so the cruel blonde boy with the horns couldn't get to them. Why did you think I was whatever that is? And why were you out here trying to capture one? You bandits think you can just do whatever you want, don't you? We're not bandits. We're poachers. We were hired to come catch these people. URK. As soon as he had said that, he knew he should have kept his mouth shut. As the aura around the blonde boy got darker, the visage of a cruelly grinning maw and 2 burning red eyes with slit pupils appearing behind the boy's head. What people? The bandit shakily but quickly pointed to the dune Naruto had plowed right through. THTH, they're in there. We have them under a tarp with CA camouflaged breathing tubes. Why did you think it was so large? Blinking, the ominous and chilling aura as well as the image floating behind him simply disappearing. Naruto tilted his head and looked back at the dune he'd plowed through the middle of. Ah, there are people in there. Scrunching his brows, the blonde turned back and kicked the poacher between the legs, getting a real high-pitched squeak as he curled up again and began trembling as Naruto walked back towards the dune. Consider my pet peeved. Making several clones, he began the process of digging the sand from the dune, creating several smaller ones around it as dust flew up when they started digging. By the time him and his clones got to the bottom, they had uncovered 2 cages on either side of the dune, explaining how he had been able to go through the middle. The cages were covered in tarps the same color as the sand around them, and indeed there were breathing tubes that had extended all the way up through the dune. Dispelling all but one clone, the boys pulled the tarps from both cages, revealing several people in either one, though their features made him blink dumbly as his clone dispelled after removing the tarp from the second cage. In one cage were 4 men with great feathered wings on their backs, dressed as if part of an old Sabaku native tribe. Looking at the other cage, it was basically a mismatch of the same, except females. Some had wings on their backs with a smaller pair on the sides of their heads, while a couple had wings for arms, and while all had bird-like claws for feet, extending up to their knees even, the former had bird claw-like hands as well. They were also quite varied in looks. They all seemed tanned, probably from living in the desert most like, but to varying degrees. And, while all the bird people who were dressed as native tribe members had lean muscle except for the women, who had quite the lovely figures to go with their slim muscles, the more typical-looking bird women had slim, teen-like figures. Shaking his head, the boy grabbed hold of the bars of the men's cage, ignoring their lackluster words on how it was no use, that the bars were much too strong to be broken. Everyone currently watching went wide-eyed and slack-jawed as the bars bent easily under the blonde boy's pulling, wrenching open with a squeal of metal. Suffice to say, it took a few moments for the bird people, hawkmen if he remembered what the poacher said correctly, to gather their wits and exit the cage, hustling it over to the cage with the winged women, who were looking at him hopefully. Now don't worry, I'll have you out of this cage in just a second. Though, this one seems a bit different than the men's cage. Oh well, it's not so different, I can't take a crack at it anyway. Smiling and cracking his knuckles, the blonde took hold of the bars of the women's cage, and began to pull. Of course, the moment he did he felt himself being shocked before the hawk men pulled him away from the cage before the electricity could spread to the women. Well then, that won't work for this cage. I really need to learn seals. Guess we do it the slow way. Accepting the help of one of the hawk men in standing up, Naruto rolled his shoulders before stepping up to the cage again and giving the females within a small wave. Room for one more? Ignoring their curious looks, he simply stepped towards the bars of the cage. And then to the avian people's shock, right through the bars, phasing through as if a ghost. Of course, for doing so, the moment he was inside the cage the women began to poke him to see if their fingers went through him or not. So, who's first? I can only take one at a time through the bars. You also might want to hold your breath when we go through, it's a little weird at first. He was expecting a little bit of bickering, maybe a small argument, but he surely didn't expect the two with arm wings to be pushed towards him first almost immediately. Smiling, he reached forward and patted the two girls on the head, making them lean into the touch absently before shaking their heads and glaring at him. Shrugging, Naruto grinned and picked one up, getting an indignant squawk and some squirming as he walked towards the bars again. The girl started struggling even more as she was sure she would be shocked by the bars, only for her eyes to widen as they passed through unharmed. She was put down soon enough, and looked thoroughly confused as the boy who'd freed her simply walked back into the cage, bringing the other wing-armed one out. They flew off together as soon as she was set down. Soon enough all the bird-like people were freed and Naruto simply punched the remaining cage into oblivion when all its occupants were free of it. Yet another thing that caused their eyes to widen, as it was certainly a feat of strength they weren't expecting. Thank you, young man, you saved us from a tight spot, and for that you have our thanks. I apologize for those two harpies who left earlier, they are from a relatively new tribe to the sands, who have a hard time trusting humans. Even one so unique looking as you. Naruto simply shook his head, waving the hawk man who'd spoken to him off. It was a tall one, easily 6 foot in height, which was really big. He didn't know too many people who made it to that height. Close to it, yeah, but not a lot who got actually there. It's okay, I don't mind if they have a hard time trusting me, it'll take time for them to regain some of that trust, and things like this just don't help it at all. Anyway, you all wouldn't happen to be part of the same tribe, would you? Looking at each other, the women and the men shook their heads, before one of the women spoke up. She was around 5'8", and had short sandy blonde hair, and if Naruto had been anyone else, he would not have been able to tear his gaze away from her curves. As it was, it had been a while since he'd eaten, and it was hard enough already. We are not of the same tribe, but they are in roughly the same direction for a little ways. We belong to neighboring tribes who are on good terms with each other. They were sent to look for us when we did not come back from a patrol. Nodding his head, Naruto hummed and then let out a sharp whistle, confusing the bird people, before someone landed behind the blonde with a thud. They bore their claws at it, at least until a chuckling Naruto waved his hands to stop them, and show that it was simply a clone of himself. Calm down, it's just me, or another me anyway. I have a clone technique, and I used it after getting a net shot at me to deal with the men you see lying about. Now, why don't you all let me escort you back home? I have business here in K's no Kuni with the Wind Daimyo concerning her hidden village, but I'm also curious as to who hired these men to go about capturing you all. Again, the hawkman that had spoken first spoke again, brows furrowed a bit. You said you had business with the Wind Daimyo? Well then you already know part of the answer. Someone in her court is having the desert tribes hunted and captured. We don't know what for, but it can't be anything good. Naruto nodded again and gave a small scowl, before shaking his head and looking to the hawkman and nodding once more. That solves that, now let's get you all home. Tell your tribes not to send anyone on patrol away from your homes for a while. I'll find out who is doing this, make them stop, and in the meantime I've got to talk to the Wind Daimyo. The man nodded, and the bird woman who'd spoken to him did the same when he turned his gaze onto her. Grinning, the blonde flared his wings out, something mimicked by the bird people, before they shot into the sky. Naruto escorting them back to their homes and thinking about just how he was going to get the hunting of the tribes to stop. Well, without summarily getting arrested for doing something violent anyway. After escorting the bird people, hawk men and harpies he had found out, back to their tribes, it had taken Naruto the rest of the day and well into the night to reach Suna. It was a bit late, but after showing his travel papers the Hokage had given him before he left, and signing a few papers, he was led into the village. It was so different from Konoha. The boy couldn't help but marvel at the place. Everywhere he looked there were buildings made of clay or something, he couldn't tell, and there were walkways all over the rooftops that led to higher-placed buildings. Humming softly as he walked along, glad that his jacket seemed to protect him a bit from the cold desert night, the blonde idly felt relief that there were no civilians outside at the moment. He had his wings out still, and his tail was freely on display. It was a wonder the guards at the gate had let him in actually. Shrugging, he folded his arms behind his head as he walked, making sure to keep track of his surroundings as he wandered, looking for a good place to sleep for the night. He planned to visit the case cage in the morning and speak with him about getting an audience with the Wind Daimyo so he could speak with her about possibly sending more missions to her own hidden village again. It truly was surprising that the Fire Daimyo wanted the flow of extra missions to stop, but he guessed it was simply because the man wanted some kind of balance, or at least for Suna not to hate their allied village or something. It was a mystery to him, but hey, it just meant that for a noble their daimyo was a pretty stand-up guy. Taking in the cool night air as he walked, Naruto soon found himself in a small park, tilting his head a bit as he spotted a red-headed girl standing in the middle of it just staring up at the sky. Blinking, he began walking towards her at a slow pace, in no rush, and trying not to spook her should she be either a ninja in training or a ninja already, like him. No need to get sharp metal to the face for spooking a trained or training ninja. Instead of talking or anything when he moved to stand next to her, he simply stayed silent and looked up at the moon with her. He of course noticed how she tensed slightly when he did, but he paid it no mind since she didn't do anything other than that. They spent a few minutes in peaceful silence as they stood there, though Naruto noticed that they were being watched from the rooftops by several Suna ninja. Of course, he could have been wrong. The village could have been infiltrated under the dead of night, and they could have been out to get him or the girl next to him, or they could have been there to take over the village and… Naruto had to shake his head at those thoughts. He had the strangest feeling he was just channeling someone right then. Letting out a soft sigh as he closed his eyes, taking another deep breath of the cool air, Naruto was surprised when the girl next to him spoke, her voice low and husky, if a bit gravely yet still feminine. "Why are you here?" Perking an eyebrow, the blonde tilted his head to glance at the redhead from the corner of his eye, noticing how her eyes had not left the moon, yet she did indeed seem to be talking to him. Humming softly, he thought about how he would answer for a few moments, leaving them in silence again for that much longer. I thought you looked lonely, standing here alone." His answer seemed to surprise her, for she turned to look at him, and he had to suppress a small smile as her eyes widened at his appearance. It wasn't every day you saw a boy with horns, a tail, and wings after all. Well, the wings may not have been weird here if the bird people were normal in the desert, but surely the horns and tail were strange to a lot of people. "What are you?" "I'm an incubus." The red-headed girl stared at him intensely, and he was able to get a good look at her face. It was soft, pretty even, not at all offset by the dark black rings around her lovely green eyes, or the red tattoo of sorts of the love kanji above her left eye. She had a slightly small nose, full lips. All in all she looked like she would certainly be a heartbreaker when she got older, if she wasn't already. He liked to think he knew a thing or two about that kind of stuff. Her next words somewhat threw him for a loop. "What is semen?" "Mother is telling me to take yours." "What?" The sand beneath his feet began to move, making his eyes widen before he leapt into the air, hovering several feet above the girl now. He was flushed a little over her sudden question, and his new vantage point let him see that she seemed to be the one controlling the sand. Watching it move about her as if some sort of barrier, he had to throw himself to the side to avoid a blast of it that attempted to ensnare him. "Come back down, or I'll break those wings you seem so proud of." "Ah, but you see, you're trying to hurt me with that sand already, right?" This seemed to give the redhead pause, and she seemed to be having some form of internal conflict with herself, giving Naruto enough time to take his backpack off and hand it to a clone that popped into existence next to him in the air, sending it up a little higher. After a few moments, the girl's eyes focused again and she stared up at him just as intensely as before. "I will, and not harm you if you come down." Giving the girl a cautious look, the blonde slowly began to float down to the ground again after a moment, the girl's eyes following him the whole way. Like a damned hawk. Once he was once more on the ground, Sand wrapped around his ankles, and he stiffened, though he stayed as calm as he could when that was all the sand seemed to do. He had to admit he was a bit curious as to how the girl gained this particular ability and why she seemed to, similar to him, in a way. When her hands found purchase on his shoulders, he found her face coming closer to his own, his glasses glinting as the girl gained an unsure look on her face, as well as a dusting of light pink. She seemed not to know just what it was she was doing, and Naruto would rather not be in this situation without knowing something very important first. Bringing a hand up to gingerly stop her lips as they were about to touch his own, he raised an eyebrow as she gave a soft growl at him, lips against his middle and ring fingers. "Why did you stop me? Are you by chance a ninja already? I am a chunin of Suna." Naruto nodded his head, before sighing softly and giving the girl a small smile. "Then, allow me to indulge you on this. Please be satisfied, I have a feeling we'll give our watchers heart attacks if you try anything else." Without further preamble, Naruto gently placed his lips on the redhead's own, making her eyes widen, before she squeezed his shoulders tightly and gave herself to the strange new feeling coursing through her. The moment their lips met, a strange heat spread through her body, pooling in the pit of her stomach. For the first time in forever, the voice in her head was quiet. The only thing she could hear was her own heartbeat, and the only thing she could see was the boy in front of her. Without knowing it, a lone tear fell down her right cheek as she closed her eyes, leaning into the kiss. Of course, after a while the kiss ended, and a moment after they parted, her eyes opened quickly as the screaming in her head came back full force, demanding she do things she had no knowledge of. Furrowing her brows, the girl took a step away from the blonde, who gave her a small smile while tilting his head in curiosity. That kiss just now had let him feel something within the girl, something violent, yet entirely similar to something he felt within himself sometimes. It reminded him of the burden he'd been told about when he graduated. XX back XX. Naruto grinned to himself as he held his new Konoha forehead protector in his hands, too giddy to put it on at the moment. He had just graduated from the academy thanks to the training he'd gotten done in the last couple years. Taijutsu with Gai-sensei, and ninjutsu with Kakashi-sensei. He was officially a genin now, and his horns and tail were proof that he was getting closer to the completion of his awakening. Of course, that was the only sad part for him, being that he would have to leave not long after all his Incubus traits showed themselves. Shaking his head, he looked up at the Hokage with a smile as he stood across from the man, only the old man's desk between them. The old Hokage returned the boy's smile with one of his own, being quite proud of the boy, as if a grandfather who was proud of his grandson's achievements. "Naruto-kun, I'm glad to see you standing before me as a ninja of this village so soon, though I must admit it also pains me a little as well. I had hoped you wouldn't have to be standing here like you are so soon as well. However, circumstances being what they are, I am glad that you have proven yourself strong enough to graduate 2 years early. As you know, we have the highest age requirement for our genin, but this allows us to produce stronger ninja when they do finally graduate. Our genin may be older, but they will almost always be stronger than other genin." The blonde boy nodded his head, giving the old man his full attention. He had a feeling this wasn't the only thing the Hokage would be speaking with him about today. He was right. "However, now that you have graduated, I feel it is time for me to tell you something that has been kept from you till now. Please know, I did not have this kept from you out of malice or some such. I had this kept from you till such a time I believed you were ready to hear it." Naruto simply nodded his head, a strange feeling welling up in him, a dichotomy of wanting to hear what the old man had to say, and not wanting to hear it at all at the same time. It was a strange feeling, but he kept himself silent, not wanting to interrupt. He felt that he needed to hear this, no matter what else he may be feeling. The Sandaime gave a long-suffering sigh, before looking Naruto in the eyes with a sad smile. "Naruto-kun, it is not easy for me to say this, but it is time for you to learn the truth about why the villagers show such disdain for you." He left out that it was now mostly the male villagers who showed such disdain. "Uzumaki Naruto, the night you were born, when this village was attacked by the Kyuubi, our Hokage of the time, the Yondaime, fought the beast and was barely able to hold the beast back. To defeat the beast was deemed quite impossible at the time, even for him. I am afraid you and every other youth in the village have been lied to, for the beast was not actually bested and killed that night. Instead, the Yondaime was forced to seal it for the safety of the village. However, the Kyuubi was far too powerful to be sealed into just any old thing. We needed a far greater vessel. The Yondaime sealed the beast inside of you, Naruto-kun. The Sandaime had to force himself to not look away from the boy's stricken face as the news was delivered. He resolved to burn the boy's face upon learning this news into his memory in repentance for keeping such a secret. The haunted look upon the boy's face as he fell to his knees would forever plague him, but that was not to say there was nothing he couldn't do to console him. Fear not, Naruto-kun. Know in your heart that you are not the beast. You are Uzumaki Naruto, genin of Konoha, and proud citizen of this village and her country. The villagers who disdain you for what you hold are wrong in their thoughts, but I feel that they can be changed over time. To falter is to let them win, to fear is to confirm their own fears, and to despair is to let down all who have faith in your abilities to hold the beast back. Be proud, Naruto-kun. You are a hero of this village. Even if they refuse to acknowledge you yet, make them acknowledge you by showing them that you are not the Kyuubi, but yourself. Naruto sniffled for a moment, eyes shadowed by his hair, before he shot up tall, wiping his eyes with his arm for a moment before bringing his forehead protector up, slipping his horns through the holes for them and tying it securely around his head. Pulling it tight, the blond boy made a fist and lifted his head as he pointed it at the old Hokage, showing that he had a large smile on his face, remnants of wiped away tears still visible. Just who the hell do you think I am? I'm Uzumaki Naruto, damn it, and I'll show those stupid villagers the difference between me and some destructive Fobit, Datbeo. Fobit? What? It's a mix of a fox and a rabbit. I've seen the pictures they drew of the Kyuubi, there's no way it's a pure fox. The old Hokage's laugh rang out through his office that day, joined by that of the blonde Incubus he'd been meeting with at the time. The secretary was confused when she heard it, but otherwise shrugged and went back to her thankfully tiny stack of paperwork. XX flashback XENDXX. Shaking his head of his thoughts, the blonde's smile turned a bit sad as he realized why it was the girl felt so similar to him. He knew of the other tailed beasts after all, just something else the old man had told him about after telling him of his burden. It wasn't very hard at all to make the connection to where he was, and the feeling he got from the girl. She must have held that sand-based one, the Ichibi. On another note, he really needed more knowledge about these things. Really, all he knew was the Ichibi had something to do with sand, the Nibi had fire and or the dead, the Sanbi had water and or coral of all things, Yanbi had lava, Gobi had steam, Rokubi had bubbles, Nanabi was a bug, Hachibi had ink for some reason, and the Kyuubi was a fox. Naruto sighed softly and looked at the girl as she seemed to be having an inner conflict again, before he reached for her, noticing how she tensed and seemed to growl as his hand landed on her shoulder. However, her eyes widened as the boy simply drew her into his arms, wrapping them around her slim waist firmly, holding her to his chest. Looking into her eyes, he leaned forward and placed his forehead against the girl's own, giving her a small smile as she tensed all up in his hold. It was clear she was certainly not used to something like this. If the heart attack he actually heard one of the ninja watching have was anything to go by, they weren't used to this either. Putting those watching out of his mind, he focused on the girl before him, looking her deep in the eyes past his glasses. I'm going to ask some questions for your mother. Would you mind telling me if she can hear me, and what she says in response to my questions? His voice was soft, and the girl seemed content to simply stay still, though instead of enjoying the hug, it was as if she were waiting for something to happen. After a moment, however, she gave a slow nod. Mother says to ask your questions. Humming softly, Naruto's eyes closed for a moment as he thought, as well as took in the fact that an incredibly powerful person was apparently making their way towards them. Giving a small shake of his head to rid himself of unnecessary thoughts, he focused on his question. First, can I persuade you to cease whatever it happening to isolate this girl? Should it be within your powers? I ask this because I believe your power to be great, and it should be a simple task. The girl in his arms wiggled a little, cheeks darkening and a small scowl forming on her face, before she almost shyly looked him in the eyes herself. Mother asks, how does she know you are not just saying that? Naruto chuckled softly, and used his tail to scoop up a little sand, bringing it up to show to the girl, who simply looked at it confused, and no doubt the being inside her was just as confused. So he decided to elaborate on why he was showing them some simple sand. You see this sand, right? Well, I feel that as the original controller of it, and even being able to exert some control from within this girl, you must be pretty powerful. Combine that with us being in a desert? Well, the way I see it, you may as well be unstoppable. The desert is nothing but an expanse of sand, all of it at your beck and call. Surely your enemies tremble, and if you have allies they rejoice whenever you have stepped upon a battlefield in this great sea of sand. Quote, the red-headed girl's face flushed, and she clenched her fists as the voice in her head yelled, though it seemed happier than it had ever been. Mother says you know what you are talking about. P perhaps a little too well. She wants to meet you. Naruto felt a pulling sensation from his gut, before the red-headed girl placed their foreheads together again, if a little roughly. Their eyes both closed at around the same time, darkness filling their vision, though Naruto soon found himself opening his eyes soon after, or so it seemed. When his eyes opened, he found himself in a strange yellow area with no walls, only darkness after a certain point. Before him was a circle of spikes, and within that circle of spikes was something that made his eyes widen, though he refrained from taking any steps back, or showing his surprise beyond the slight widening of his eyes. Sitting there in the circle of comparatively tiny spikes was a giant beast made of sand, with dark blue lines littering its body, and its eyes were quite unique. Its scleras were black, with yellow irises and pupils that each takes the shape of a black four-pointed star with 4 black dots around it. Its tail was thick, about half as thick as its body at the middle, and all in all, the beast looked a little disgruntled. Before the blonde could say anything, the beast let out a grunt and pointed behind him. I knew it. Felt it the moment your lips touched the brat's own. You got one of us inside you too. Gahahaha, and look at that, it's Mr. Oh, I'm the strongest 'cause I got the most tails. Ha, not so high and mighty now all stuck in your cage. Blinking, Naruto turned his head and his eyes widened again, spotting an enormous cage behind him, the darkness losing the yellow-tinted light about a couple dozen feet before the cage. From behind said thing, Naruto spotted 2 colossal eyes of burning red with slit pupils, and a large fanged mouth set in a toothy snarl. Silence one tail, my binding shows just how much more powerful I am than you with its necessity. I don't see any such bars holding you back. HMPH. Guess that means you're too weak to need them. Naruto could just feel the smirk on the fox's face, and sighed, rubbing his temples as the giant sand tanuki growled loudly at the fox. Grr, you're just lucky I can't leave this circle of stones. Y'all wouldn't be sayin' that malarkey if I could rattle your cage a bit. Before anything else could be said, Naruto cleared his throat loudly, catching the sand tanuki's attention. I greet you, O great and powerful Ichibi. Pay no mind to the fox over there. I assure you he can't get out right now. Though, in the future that may be debatable depending on how future talks between us go. For now, I have come here to speak to you, and you alone, so let's send him away for now, shall we? With a wave of his hand, the blonde Incubus made the Kyuubi's cage disappear, presumably back into the recesses of his mind, effectively cutting the connection between their minds for the moment. He didn't need the Kyuubi to hear anything he said to the giant tanuki made of sand after all. There, the fobbit is gone. Fobbit? Was it? Oh, it's a mix between a fox and a rabbit. You've seen the Kyuubi, right? It's like its species confused. There's no way he's just a fox, right? The great sand beast was silent for a few moments, thinking over what the tiny blonde boy had just said. Finally, it gave a loud laugh and patted its stomach with one giant paw, catching Naruto with its piercing stare. Ahahaha, that's great, fobbit, damn fobbit, thinking it's more powerful than me just 'cause it's got more tails. Is that what he thinks? My, how arrogant, Naruto spoke, as if agreeing with the tanuki of sand in the circle of spiky stones. Surely he has simply never seen you at work in a desert. The ability to control sand would be truly invaluable in such a place, and whoever had said ability would be truly powerful. Though, I get the feeling no mere mortal could ever hope to wield sand as great as you seem to be able to. Why, you're made of it if I'm seeing correctly, that's got to amplify your power if anything. The Ichibi drank up Naruto's words, compliments and praise, reaching one titanic paw up to scratch at its head. Duh, you're just trying to butter me up, damn it. No, I truly believe that the ability to control sand is an awesome ability. I envy your container, the one stuck in me doesn't really talk to me at all. Sure, I could do without the being unable to sleep part, but for the ability to control sand even a fraction as good as you likely do? Sigh, oh well though. It's not like I can get that power, but I would like to make a request, Mr. Powerful Tanuki-sama. The Ichibi had an almost visible blush on his face now as Naruto spoke, and truly it did his pride mighty good to hear the container of that damned nine tails say he was envious of his container. He, the mighty Shukaku, had the envy of the mighty Kurama's container. Just the thought of it tickled him pink. Well, go ahead and make your request. You're not exactly human, so I don't mind listening to a couple. Smiling, Naruto gave a small bow, feeling the talk with the great beast was going quite well, and with any luck he could get some information, and at least get the great beast to leave the girl who contained him alone. Hopefully let her sleep even. My request is for you to stop bullying the girl who contains you, if it's not too much trouble. She has the ability to control sand, if to a lesser extent than you. She is technically your little sister of sorts, so you shouldn't be picking on her so much. And another thing, you are a proud male Tanuki-sama. Stop making the girl call you mother, and finally, I ask that you let the poor girl sleep. I hear you don't like to let your containers do that, but if this girl has your sand controlling ability, it's like I said, she's practically your little sister. You should be protecting her, doting on her, chasing away any boys who try to ask her out on dates, and completely rend to shreds anyone who tries to harm her. Mwahahahaha. Ahem. Sorry, I got a little carried away there. The Ichibi was silent for quite a while after Naruto spoke, for his request was a long one, and the Ichibi found itself having to seriously contemplate it, as well as take into account his hatred of humanity. On one hand, his container was a stupid little girl who basically leached his chakra and sand control ability. On the other hand, this could be just the chance he needed to finally have a sibling that respected and looked up to him, unlike all 8 of his other ones. The Kyuubi was the worst, sure, and the rest had quirks, but they were never particularly on his side. If he could train the girl up a bit, make her his little sister, he'd finally have someone on his side. Plus, he'd get to scare away boys who tried to get close to her and help destroy her enemies. Well, I do hate humans, but you ain't a human kid, so I'll consider it, but why'd ya go and ask me something like this? I thought you would've asked for my awesome sand control ability. Well, I kind of already contained the Kyuubi, I honestly didn't think you'd allow something like that. I mean, I'd welcome it, but I have a goal to achieve that would make having it kind of hard if I got it right now. The great sand tanuki raised a non-existent eyebrow at the blonde standing before its little ring of spiky rocks. And just what's that, huh? What kinda goal do you have that would keep you from wanting my awesome ability? The blonde incubi's next words stunned the Ichibi into silence. My goal is to understand, befriend, free them without killing their host, and find or make a home for them somewhere where they can't be used as tools of war any longer. Where they can have peace if they so desire it, and get away from all the hate humanity has to offer. Naruto stood there looking up at the Ichibi for what felt like 10 minutes after he told the beast his goal, before finally the creature spoke again, though its voice was lower and a bit calmer, as it reached for the edge of the ring of spiky rocks. Kid, gimme your hand, would ya? Blinking, Naruto was a little skeptical, but he slowly did as asked, reaching just his hand through the gap between 2 of the spiky rocks. The moment his hand was through, the great big sand tanuki took it in his giant paw, and the blonde incubus felt a surge of energy flowing through him, his eyes widening at the feeling. The Ichibi was giving him some of its chakra. Don't go wasting my trust, kid. You remind me a bit of someone I once knew, a long time ago. You've taken my chakra willingly, if you break my trust, my faith, I will make you suffer with it. And I'm already a little crazy, so you might die. Ahahahaha. Naruto gulped and sweat dropped at once, heart swelling at the act of the Ichibi, before he shook his head and gave a grin. If I'm stupid enough to break the mighty Ichibi-sama's trust, then I'll likely deserve whatever happens to me. You can count on me, Datbeo. Datbeo? Gahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahhahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahahhieh Before he was allowed to exit the domain of the Ichibi, the last thing he heard being the great tanuki's laughing stop for a moment, for it to tell him its name. Hey kid, snort the name's Shukaku-sama, remember it brat? Ahahahaha. When he next opened his eyes, he was staring at the red-headed girl from earlier, their eyes locked for several moments, though her eyes seemed glazed a bit. She must have been talking with the Ichi no to Shukaku. He gave the girl a small smile, and kept his arms around her as she began trembling, and Naruto simply held her tighter. You don't have to be alone anymore. Hey, now you have someone to look after you, help you when you need it, scare away stupid boys who try to flirt with you. What was that last part? I said you don't have to be afraid of hurting people by falling asleep anymore. Your new super awesome big brother has agreed to let you sleep almost whenever you want from now on, and I believe he's going to help you get stronger, but there is a condition. See condition. What is it? I am curious as to what sleep truly feels like. You must call him Oni-sama, believe in him, and defer to him first when you need help with something that doesn't fall into the feminine needs category of stuff. Inside the red-headed girl, the Ichibi was fist-pumping at what he was hearing. It was just what he always wanted, a sibling that was on his damn side for once. The redhead herself meanwhile was contemplating it, before giving an almost shy nod of her head. That seems acceptable. I shall try to sleep sometime within the next few hours. For now there are many people I need to speak to. I may have some apologies to make, though I fear it will be difficult. I am so used to loving only myself, for fighting for only myself, to killing those who even look at me wrong, killing to prove my existence. How will I do that now? Oni-sama has told me I don't have to kill anymore. Where has mother gone? Naruto smiled a bit, though the edges of his lips twitched at the girl's words, before he shook his head. Your mother is resting now. It is your super awesome Oni-sama's turn to occupy that pretty little head of yours. Don't worry, he has lots of great advice for you when you need it, and he's really powerful, so anyone who tries to pick on you will have to deal with him, understand? I believe I do. This will be very difficult. Ah, why does Oni-sama sound so much like mother? Sweating a bit, the blonde thought fast, and winged it before spouting out the most logical sounding thing he could think of to answer that question. Their mother and son, of course they'd sound similar. I see. That does explain why big sister says my brother sometimes sounds somewhat like their mother when he screams. Naruto's sweat dropped at that, and inside the redhead the Ichibi did the same. Except the Ichibi had been there to hear it sometimes through his container. That boy that was her biological older brother did sound remarkably like a female when he screamed sometimes. Looking the girl in the eyes again, the blonde Incubus smiled and gave her a squeeze, still hugging her to his chest since earlier. Hey, the Oni-sama of this girl. Make sure to help her adjust to not killing people just milling around on the streets, will you? And be sure to scold her like a proper Oni-sama when she slips up, okay? Naruto winked and the redhead flushed softly, giving a small growl at the blonde, who simply leaned forward and planted a kiss on her forehead. She instantly calmed down and wrapped her arms around his neck, giving him a squeeze as she tried to pour all the strange feelings she had in her chest into her hug. It was the first she'd ever given, really. The blonde was easily able to receive the girl's emotions, her gratitude, apprehension, anxiety, and just a little bit of anger. Yes, the girl really had some issues, no doubt due to long years of similar if not worse happenings as he went through in Konoha, atop of not being able to sleep. Well, he felt as if he had just exercised his devil's luck with this situation. And all he had to do was bullshit out his ass, except for his goal, and in return he helped a fellow Biju container, and helped both container and Biju gain a new sibling that would hopefully always be on each other's side. Letting out a soft sigh, he nuzzled the girl's cheek, before he practically heard a loud gasp from in the girl's head, possibly hinting at some form of limited telepathic connection between him and the beast the red-headed girl contained, at least while within close proximity. As soon as heard it, the sand at their feet surged up and pushed him away roughly. While the redhead looked on confused, the sand soon floated into the shape of kanji, spelling out a sentence that thoroughly shocked all those watching from the rooftops. Perhaps they had all collectively caught a cold, or something from the desert night's chill and were hallucinating. There in the air, the sand coming from the redhead spelled out the words, "Don't think you don't count just because you helped. Stay away from my Imouto-chan, you little brat." Naruto's sweat dropped, before he felt a hand land on his shoulder, only making the drop of sweat bigger as he turned to look at who it was. There behind him, with basically a blank face he couldn't tell, it was covered by a white cloth. The case of Sanagakure no Sato stood, and the eyes he was giving the blonde right now spoke of a strange dichotomy of murder and thankfulness. "Come to my office, young Konoha ninja. We have much to discuss about my daughter, what she holds, and what seems to be a very drastic change in the behavior of both since you showed yourself to the former." Gulping, the blonde could only give a nod and acquiesce to the man's order, because that's what it was. He wasn't asking him all friendly-like, or even all stoic-like. He was asking him as a father who was at the same time glad he had helped his daughter, and angry that he had been so close to her. Hopefully he hadn't been informed about their kiss. "I also need to speak with you about the status of the chastity of my daughter's lips." Eyewitnesses seem to have a very interesting report about that. Fuck. Naruto sat in Seiza before the case cage, his backpack holding his porta-home sitting beside him, and the red-headed girl, who'd been introduced as Garuna, sitting on his other side, giving her best glare at her father, while also trying to internalize it towards her new Onisama for trying to keep her away from the blonde boy with the interesting features. Features which she had threatened to break when they had just met. So far, she had had to sit by and watch as her father glared at the blonde she was sitting next to as he explained what had gone down between him and the Ichibi sealed inside Garuna. Of course, the man had also subtly threatened the blonde should his lips ever go near Garuna's again, something that did not please the girl at all. Hence her own glaring, as her father continued glaring at the blonde sitting next to her, sweating fervently. Finally, the case cage growled out a sigh, somehow mixing the sounds before shaking his head and slamming a hand on the floor. "Tell me, why are you here in the first place? What brings a ninja of Konoha here, even if you are technically an ally of ours?" Naruto sighed softly and used his tail to comb his hair back a bit, before focusing once more on the case cage, who seemed to be attempting to release some of his anger into the atmosphere. "I come for directions, actually, though I had planned on asking for them tomorrow. You see, I need to have an audience with the Wind Daimyo as soon as possible, for two purposes, one of which will benefit this village quite a bit." The Yondaime case cage raised an eyebrow beneath his hat, and crossed his arms as he waited expectantly for the boy to continue, curious as to what he had to say after such a claim. "For one, upon journeying into Kase no Kuni's lands, I was almost successfully ambushed by a group of poachers who had been capturing hawk men and harpies, apparently on orders of someone in the Wind Daimyo's court. I seek to ask her to help me put a stop to it, but that at least can wait till my second reason is finished, so long as it doesn't require some long and arduous task itself before it'll be completed." Noticing that the blonde had yet to mention what task he had that would benefit his village, since it surely wasn't the halted poaching of the avian races of the desert, the case cage turned another glare onto the boy, hoping to pressure him into speaking faster. It worked, to his hidden joy. The second reason I am in need of an audience with the Wind Daimyo is because the Fire Daimyo has personally given me the task of requesting that she stop exporting missions away from this village. I am then to ensure that it happens, and have been spent especially due to special skills I have with persuading certain kinds of people. "Oh? What kinds of people do you have special skills in persuading, specifically?" Well, I'm an Incubus, case cage-sama. It means I am the ultimate negotiation tool for any female considered of age. The effects of my abilities are viable on any female who has begun having their period, and the effects get stronger the older they get till they reach their prime." The case cage was struck truly speechless by this, and he considered himself lucky he was wearing the cloth over his mouth because his jaw just dropped at the boy's revelation. It would explain the horns, tail, and wings if nothing else. Good thing no one saw his speechless expression, he had a reputation to uphold. Finally, however, Garuna had had enough of simply sitting by and letting the two males talk. She glared at her father and shuffled closer to Naruto, grabbing hold of his right arm and hugging it to her chest, despite how her sand seemed to move about as if in agitation and give little pushes against the blonde. "Give him directions to that woman, and I shall give you sand in places it shouldn't go, and grind away at the flesh there whenever your attention turns away from me. This one belongs to me, I shall let none unworthy of him have him." Both Naruto and the Yondaime case cage were struck speechless, the latter for a second time, both at his daughter's threat and proclamation. The blonde whose arm the redhead was holding however found himself extremely pale, and he began mentally pleading to Shukaku to get him away from the girl, even if it meant creating a wall between them out of the sand. His prayers were answered as the Ichibi took to its new role of Onisama, honored big brother, like an old hand, the sand usually under Garuna's control surging up and cutting the redhead off from the blonde she had just claimed. The girl growled and began to push against the wall of sand in an attempt to get at Naruto once more. Said blonde simply stood up and gave a sad look at the sand wall, as if he were peering past it at Garuna, before turning to look at the girl's father, the cage. The man looked back at him, and a silent conversation seemed to go on, before the cage stealthily tossed the young Incubus a scroll with directions on it. Garuna, grow stronger, okay? Listen to your new Oni-sama, and protect him too once you're strong enough, okay? We'll see each other again sometime, I'm sure of it. How big can this world of ours be, right? With that the blonde simply flew away out the window, leaving a roaring and crying Garuna, who was soon embraced by the sand, if entirely awkwardly, and comforted by her father in an even more awkward manner. The man simply had no clue how to go about comforting his daughter, despite how subtly, not very subtle, he cared for her. Naruto hefted his backpack as he entered the capital city of Kase no Kuni, Sabaku no Idai-sa. A large desert city styled with a huge bazaar, a residential district, the almost customary red light district, and of course, the home of the Wind Daimyo and her court. A quite large palace made of stone and such. Basically think Caldeum from Diablo 3, if a bit smaller. He had flown all through what had remained of the night, and even well into the afternoon of the following day before reaching the capital of Wind Country, where the cage's directions had led him. He hadn't doubted for a moment that the cage of Suna gave him correct information. He was basically on a pseudo mission to bring back the flow of missions to Suna after all. All he had to do was seduce the Wind Daimyo into agreeing to sending missions back to her own village instead of Konoha. Couldn't be too hard. The scroll the cage had given him had also conveniently contained a letter of introduction to the Wind Daimyo for him. He had said item unsealed from the scroll and at the reed in the sleeve of his jacket, ready to be shown to whatever guards the Wind Daimyo had stationed at her gates. Walking through the bazaar, the blonde fiddled with the straps to his backpack, wishing he knew sealing so he could carry his porta home easier and safer. Much safer. He knew the fairies said it would be hard to break, but he still worried about just that happening. Shaking his head, he soon approached a crowd of people chattering with each other, and a group of well-dressed and armored individuals with long, sturdy glaives standing before them, stopping them from entering what he guessed to be the palace and court of the Wind Daimyo. For someone who lived in a desert, she sure had some wealthy tastes. Everywhere he looked at the palace, he saw finely carved marble, other such stones, and expensive statues and pots, etc. all laying around behind the guards. They must have been quite powerful to keep people from just taking those things. Sighing, the boy's tail swished in slight agitation as he came to the back of the group, hefting his backpack up his shoulders a bit before floating a few inches up to look over the people's heads. Of course, he figured it would happen. But mere moments after he did this he noticed a sudden hush around the bazaar. And he suddenly had the attention of quite a few people, all of whom were simply staring at him. Flushing a bit, and noticing how, strangely enough, many women looked between him and a magazine for some reason, Naruto gave a small wave at the group in front of him, and the guards who now seemed almost entirely focused on him as he floated back to the ground. Hello Tilda? I have a letter of introduction here from the cage of this country's hidden village. I request an audience with the Wind Daimyo about urgent matters. If it's not too much trouble. He averted his gaze from the guards, one of which was a woman giving him a similar look to the few females still looking between him and a magazine they were holding, though he couldn't see which magazine it was. He was nonetheless curious as to why they were doing that. Shaking his head, he pulled the letter from his sleeve and handed it over to the guard at the front of the gaggle of them, a large muscular man of around 5'9", who took the letter amicably and opened it, reading through it before giving a slight nod. Okay, you look a bit strange, but if Cage Dono trusts you despite how you look, you shall be allowed to see the Daimyo-sama. You people, please step back as we take this boy inside. No, you may not go in with him, and no, it is not unfair. He has a letter that proves he has gained a high-ranking official's trust, hence allowing him entrance. No, I doubt he could have stolen it directly from the cage's person, in fact I highly doubt that. Now move along. Shouted questions rebuffed, continuously blocked from attempting to enter the palace. The people who had been chattering with themselves about how to get in gave disgruntled looks to the weird teenaged boy with horns, wings and a tail as he was led into the place they wanted to be by one of the male guards. Naruto was made to wait as the very large, heavy double doors into the palace were opened, having to restrain himself from doing it for the people already opening them. Why the doors were so heavy they each needed 6 heavily muscled people in fine clothes he might add, to open them, he would never know. Shrugging, he continued following the guard leading him the moment the doors were open enough for them to continue on. He had figured the inside of the palace would be just as lavish as the outside, but this was kind of ridiculous. Everywhere he looked there were fine tapestries, priceless presumably pots and other antiques, and snobby-looking people were milling about in clothing as lavish as the inside of the palace. This was ridiculous. The citizens and hidden village of this country looked the way they did, and were hurting for missions and funds in the case of the latter, and the daimyo here had such lavish decorations and obviously expensive items strewn about her court? Geez, not even the fire daimyo had such expensive tastes. Just what the hell kind of woman had he been sent to seduce? Shaking his head with a twitching eyebrow, the blonde kept focus on what exactly he was here to do, giving a small sigh after a moment when the guard of all people seemed to get lost for a moment. Waiting relatively patiently for him to get his bearings, the blonde incubus took the time to look around a little more, noticing that for some strange reason there were noblewomen holding copies of that same damned magazine as the women outside the palace, and they too were giving strange looks between him and the magazine. Personally, he found that a little frustrating and he silently endeavored to find out what the connection was between that magazine and him. Blinking and looking back to the guard as he seemed to find his way again, the blonde gave a small pout and continued following him with one last look at the small group of noblewomen looking between him and that damned magazine. In barely any time at all, he found himself standing before another grandiose pair of doors that just looked like they belonged in this high-class place. They honestly wouldn't fit in anywhere else actually. They were royal purple in color, with golden accents lining them and little jewels dangling from key points. The things rich people did with the overabundance of money they had sometimes. Waiting for these doors to be opened enough for them to go through took significantly less time than the main doors into the palace, though he had no idea why since they looked as if they should have been heavier than the other doors. Dismissing the thought as they walked into what he guessed was the Wind Daimyo's personal room, he was surprised to find a surprising lack of lavish items filling the place. There was a surprising lack of priceless antiques or vases or tapestries. Just loots and lots of pillows, and a thin layer of smoke that smelled mildly fruity, and a traditional-looking wooden table that was quite low to the ground. Sitting at the table was a single person, a woman wearing what looked like a harem outfit, if extremely higher quality. She even had the see-through veil over her face, and the whole outfit was a lavender color with gold trim and accents printed on it. Her hair was black, and in quite a simple ponytail behind her. Her skin was a nice dark tan, and she had lovely purple eyes. For all intents and purposes she looked nothing like he'd expect a daimyo to look, though she did look quite lovely like the fire daimyo had heard. She was certainly beautiful enough to be some kind of royalty at least. "What is it, guard? Why have you brought this boy before me?" Naruto blinked at the sound of the woman's voice, as it had a slight echo in the room, though it certainly seemed just large enough to allow for such a thing. That wasn't the strange thing though, it was the fact that she sounded nothing like he'd been expecting. It was almost kind even if she didn't call the guard by name. With how many she probably had, he wouldn't be able to remember individual names either. And here he'd been expecting her to at least sound snobbish to offset her rather humble for a friggin' daimyo looks. The guard cleared his throat softly, giving a small wave of his hand in front of his face to clear a little smoke from the rather large hookah sitting beside the woman, the hose for it in her hand as she idly puffed on it. "This young man comes bearing a letter of introduction from the case cage. The barrier squad estimates that while powerful, his level is not enough to have stolen it, so we have granted him permission to enter and seek an audience with you." Doesn't seeking an audience usually mean I need to give permission first? Oh well, at least it's one less problem. You may leave now, guard, return to your post. I assure you I will be quite safe. I trust that despite our differences, my case cage would not send me an assassin. The guard gave a small bow before turning and leaving, as if it was perfectly normal to just leave some perfect stranger alone with the ruler of a country, even with the ruler's permission. Now Naruto was puzzled. This was looking as if it was going to be entirely too easy for a request given by the fire daimyo. From what he'd seen so far, the wind daimyo was quite possibly the least noblewoman acting daimyo he figured he would ever see. Not that that was a bad thing, it was simply a bit unnerving. He was brought out of his thoughts by a ring of smoke billowing against his forehead, making him blink as he focused on the wind daimyo as she stood gracefully and made her way over to him. She circled him a few times, even taking hold of his tail or wings on a couple passes, before her fingers touched upon his horns, and the blonde had to suppress a shiver from going down his spine through all of it. Those first two things were sensitive places, damn it. Forcing himself not to glare, he settled for a pout at the woman even though it tickled his pride as a male to do it. He may like certain articles of women's clothing, but he was a healthy hetero male, damn it. Finally, the woman made her way back to her pile of pillows, seating herself and slipping her legs back under the table a bit. Come, sit with me, young Konoha ninja. If you sought an audience with me, then it is yours. Tell me what has brought you here, and I shall see if it is possible to help. I am new to this whole daimyo thing, but I give my word to do my best at the very least. He had been getting these strange, shocking moments from the woman since he stepped into the room, so the blonde was understandably a little nervous. Therefore, he said the first thing that came to mind, which was frankly his honest opinion at the moment. Is this a trap of some kind? Am I being pranked? The woman's lilting laugh reached his ears, and brought a small flush to his cheeks that he promptly forced away, even as he silently accepted the woman's offer to sit with her. Hey, he was skeptical, not rude. The two sat there in companionable silence for a few minutes, the wind daimyo simply enjoying smoking her hookah, while the blonde ninja sat across from her was simply trying to think of how to bring up his reasons for being there. Finally, the woman sighed and set the hose of her hookah down, blowing out a plume of smoke that slowly dissipated into the already existing, if light, fog of it permeating the room with its deceptively nice scent. You know, I may not look it, but I am quite busy right now, and I will be for quite some time as I divvy up my predecessor's assets for dispersion to my many citizens. I never agreed with having so much expensive things while the people of my country lived frugally. This isn't a trap. I am just very busy, again, despite how I may seem right now. Naruto gave a small nod at the woman, before taking a deep breath, and letting it out slowly, calming himself for this talk with such an important person. Talking to his own daimyo was easier because he was a part of the man's country. He was not a citizen of Kase no Kuni, and therefore had to have a little more tact, especially considering this country and his own were actually allies. I have come to you today with two reasons, though I am unsure how to order those since both now seem as if they would be a bit of a burden for you. However, I've never been one to idle, so here it goes. Most recent one first, I guess. It has come to my attention that someone in your court has been hiring poachers to hunt and capture the desert native tribes of your country. I was only witness to hawk men and harpies being held captive, but for all I know there could be others being captured even as we speak. I only took out one group after all. The woman pondered the boy's words even as he spoke them, a thoughtful expression on her face as her brows slowly furrowed. It was certainly ringing some bells in her head in regards to a few of the nobles in her court. Holdouts from the ones her father appointed. I see. I have noticed several new items some of the older nobles, from my father's time as daimyo, have managed to get a hold of. I believe they are trying to be subtle about it, simple yet usually expensive items, such as harpy feather accessories, lamia scale items. We are in the process of getting rid of most lavish items within the palace. Most of it belongs to me by right of succession to daimyo, but I am not forcing the existing nobles to give up their personal belongings. I have no idea why they would feel the need to do something like this beyond simple greed. The blonde nodded his head, and though he was supremely curious as to how such a person as this woman became daimyo, even if she was the daughter of the last one, the matter of the basically kidnapped desert natives was more pressing. Then there was his second reason for being here, though it was arguably his original reason. He would be stating it second because it didn't have a time limit. Is there any way to investigate these nobles without causing an incident? I was almost shot down not long after entering this country for being mistaken for a rare hawk man with 3 sets of wings. I would very much like it if I don't have a similar run-in anytime soon. Well, there is a way, but it's not exactly a good idea with all the security I have posted around to keep out thieves. For personal reasons I don't have ninja guards due to a daimyo being unable to hire them from anywhere other than their own country's hidden village. I would need someone able to sneak about and find evidence of the ordered poaching before any official investigation could be launched. No offense, but you seem entirely too flashy to be a candidate for such a task. Naruto waved the woman off, though in hindsight if it weren't the woman before him he would have seriously insulted a country's daimyo. You don't need to worry about how I look if you'd like me to do some condoned snooping. I can dismiss my wings, and hide my other notable features with a henge, plus I have a pretty decent level of stealth. I'm sure I can sneak around non-ninja guards and nobles. The woman raised an eyebrow at him, before shaking her head lightly, giving a small shrug. That would be plausible for the most part. Except there are seals ingrained in the floors that prevent chakra use. Plus, our barrier squad monitors all chakra levels and usage outside of the palace. The nobles I suspect to be responsible for the poaching don't live here. They have private estates out in the city's upper residential district. The blonde Incubus nodded at the woman with a snap of his fingers. That would be a problem. Unless, do you have a way to completely seal off a person's chakra? If you do, I can do some snooping for you with only minor problems on account of my appearance. However, I am still a ninja. Disappearing is simply something we do. The Wind Daimyo thought about it for a moment, curious as to why he was asking such a thing, and how he would be able to infiltrate the estates of the suspected nobles without chakra. Just as she was about to ask, he raised a hand and gave a small smile. Don't worry about how I'll do it. I have another source of energy besides chakra that I'm certain your barrier team can't track. It's unique after all. Tilda. He grinned at her and she couldn't help but grin back, before giving a small nod of her head and lifting her hookah, placing it on the table and offering the hose to him. He was a bit skeptical, but with a shrug he accepted the hose and brought the bit to his lips, taking a curious draw from it. His brows furrowed after he began, but he took the hit like a champ, not coughing or anything before he handed the hose back to the daimyo. After a second, he let out the smoke he had drawn in with a sigh and stuck out his tongue. Not your flavor, huh? Does it come in ramen flavor? The Wind Daimyo blinked, before giggling and shaking her head. I'm afraid not, but it does sound interesting, if it could be done correctly. Anyway, I'd like to ask you to wait till night time before doing any snooping, but until then I would like you to relax and enjoy some desert hospitality. Nodding, the blonde gave a small smile and shuffled his legs a bit under the table, making himself a bit comfortable. This was good. His original reason for coming here could be taken care of fairly quickly if everything went right. Clearing his throat softly, he drew the woman's attention once more as she took a puff from her hookah again. I have one more thing to discuss with you, Daimyo-sama, though I understand if the subject irks you. You see, the original reason I wanted an audience with you is to see if I can't negotiate with you on the matter of returning missions to your own hidden village instead of to my own. This is something I was asked to request of you by my own daimyo, you see. The woman gave an unladylike grunt as soon as he finished speaking, and her cheeks seemed to puff up as she looked away from him belligerently. Sweat dropping, the blonde shook his head and cleared his throat softly to try and break the sudden ice that seemed to have frosted over any further talking. I'm sorry, is there a reason you seem so intent on making your country's hidden village suffer? You seemed like quite a good person from what little I was able to discern from our talking. What brought this on, Daimyo-sama? The woman growled a little at his prodding, and a small scowl appeared on her face before she turned to him. And why shouldn't I let them suffer? Suffer as that poor girl has suffered due to that village's stupidity. Naruto was lost, tilting his head curiously after the woman finished speaking, though before he could open his mouth to ask his question, the Wind Daimyo beat him to it. Sabaku no Garuna. Because of that village, that girl has suffered since her birth for something out of her control. Did you know? I'm related to that girl's family on her mother's side. She was a cousin of mine. Every time I tried to visit before I became daimyo, I was never allowed to visit Garuna. I could never tell Kurora how her youngest daughter was, if she was eating okay or being loved. And frankly, I would have been lying if I did tell her grave something like that. That was kind of depressing. Shaking his head, Naruto gently slapped his hand on the table, startling the woman across from him a bit. You don't need to worry about Garuna anymore. I already helped her before I came here, in fact. The Wind Daimyo raised an eyebrow, remaining calm even though her heart had skipped a beat or two at the boy's exclamation. Did he know of Garuna's burden? Just how exactly had he helped her, and was she okay? These thoughts all swirled in her head till she was swaying a bit, before she shook her head and focused on the blonde sitting across from her. Helped her, is it? How do I know you aren't just saying that? And what exactly did you help her with? I know for fact a single boy's words or actions wouldn't be enough to sway an entire village. That is exactly what would need to happen to help Garuna. The look of resolution in the blonde's eyes made the Wind Daimyo sweat a little, before she found herself shocked at the revelation he dropped on her like some sort of paper bomb. The Ichibi is no longer a problem for Garuna or the village, though I can't say the same for any male who tries to flirt with her in the future. She still has lots of issues that need fixing, and she'll need plenty of TLC to get through those issues, but I have set her on the path to recovery. Fast-tracked it, you could even say. The Wind Daimyo gulped almost audibly, and only the fact she was a woman and lacked an Adam's apple prevented Naruto from seeing the act. How did you find out about the one tail? This time the smile Naruto gave the woman was a sad one, and a hand went to his stomach, drawing the daimyo's attention. Because me and her are the same. The woman's eyes widened, before she clenched them shut and reached up to rub her temples. Great, she had a damned Jinchuriki in her personal office. He didn't seem violent or anything, but from reports she got about Garuna, she had kind of expected it. Okay, I can acknowledge that, but that still doesn't tell me what you did. So tell me, just what did you do that would allow you to be so sure the one tail is no longer a problem? Naruto gave the biggest shit-eating grin he could muster, before he threw the woman a thumbs up. I bullshitted the Ichibi into making Garuna his baby sister, of course. Ahahaha. The Wind Daimyo didn't know what to think about what the boy across from her had just said. On one hand it sounded completely asinine and retarded, but on the other hand the Ichibi was known to be a lit. Okay, a lot crazy, so maybe using crazy against crazy was the correct call? Still she resumed rubbing her temples as she tried to absorb what the boy had just spouted off. Is that why you said it'd only be a problem to males who try to hit on Garuna in the future? Just what did you tell that insane beast? I told him that since Garuna had basically his same ability to control sand, that practically made her his baby sister, and that he should protect her as her Oni-sama. Of course, he seemed to do most of the thinking after a certain point, and he seemed really eager to make her his baby sister for some reason. Do you think there could be some friction between the Biju? How would I know? I don't even know about the other ones, just the one my hidden village has. You said you were a container, you talked to the Ichibi without having an aneurysm, why don't you try talking to your own beast sometime? The woman's dismissive tone all of a sudden was a little agitating, but Naruto dealt with it since he had the feeling she wanted to check on Garuna. Chuckling softly, he looked from the woman to her hookah, something not a lot of people had in Konoha, or in Hai no Kuni in general. They were something of semi-luxury items in the desert that was K's no Kuni after all. Nay, the village will have to report this change to you soon, right? Won't you be able to confirm it for yourself soon enough? His own tone had turned almost conversational, and it made the Wind Daimyo twitch at the subject matter he was using said tone for. That was her relative he'd claimed to have helped in the most idiotic yet strangely successful of ways. Finally huffing, she brought the hose of her hookah to her lips and took a deep pull of it, inhaling the smoke and averting her eyes from the blonde ninja across from her once more. Letting out the smoke slowly, she spoke softly after a moment. That's true, they will have to report such a change in Garuna's status to me should it be true. But I am worried. I am also conflicted. You bullshitted a Biju. Do you have any advice for this kind of situation? Sweat dropping, he gave a small shrug. I don't really see what that has to do with this, but if you want my opinion. If you're that worried you should probably just tell them to send her here so she can adjust to being around people who don't display overt fear of her. I mean, you're already taking away missions from them, what's one ninja? While his tone got a little accusing at the end, his seemed sincere enough that the woman put some real thought into his proposition. I may just do that. Though, depending on their reaction to the request, I may just think about your request to stop sending most of their missions elsewhere. Is there any chance I could get you to escort her here after your snooping is over with? Naruto paled a bit at that question, earning a raised eyebrow from the Wind Daimyo before the boy shook his head rapidly. I don't think that's a very good idea. I think it would be much better if she had an escort from her own village rather than me personally. And just why would you think that? You're the one that supposedly helped her, right? Why don't you want to escort her here? I'm sure if what you say is true that she's likely quite grateful to you or something. No way. Naruto blushed and looked away from the daimyo, who gave an almost malicious grin at the boy's look, and the fact he refused to meet her gaze. What happened? Did the big bad Incubus meet a girl he couldn't charm into bed? This time the boy snorted a bit, though he still blushed and wouldn't meet the woman's gaze, peeved. I wish that were the case. I don't think I'd ever leave that bed if I did get her in it with me. I think your relative may be what people call a yandere, Miss Wind Daimyo. The woman's sudden bout of laughing didn't help the blonde at all.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.